Chapter 289. Night fell. When the spotlights illuminated the wreckage of the battlefield, soldiers in the Federal Army's uniform shuttled back and forth. They lowered their heads and carefully searched for something that was left on the battlefield. Click! The sound of the shutter rang out, and a photo was produced. It captured the tragic battlefield with sparks still left on it, and the soldiers who were looking for something in it. Second Lieutenant, aren't you going to rest? At this time, a voice sounded. Ray Minkai put down the photo in his hand, looked back, and found that it was the captain of the 8th Squad, Shiro Amada. Captain Amada, you didn't rest either, right? Ray Minkai smiled and waved the camera in his hand. I still have an interview task on hand. Even if I was temporarily transferred to the 6th Squad now, the headquarters didn't inform me to put down the original battlefield interview. So, you took advantage of the free time after the battle to continue your interview task? Shiro Amada glanced at the soldiers who were searching for something in the wreckage. Well, yes. Compared to staying in the conference room, I prefer to stay outside. After a pause, Ray Minkai asked again, Captain Amada, what exactly is that thing? After the Magella tank team was blown up by Ray Minkai with number 3 Gauda's meteor hammer, the fleeing truck was also caught and captured by number 3 Gao. Fortunately, the driver was not the kind of person from the Guion army who was unafraid of death. No, perhaps he was not even from the Guion army. Lei Minkai still clearly remembered that when facing the Vulcan cannon installed on the chest of the number 3 Gundam, the driver with a face full of panic actually slammed on the brakes and stopped the truck by the side of the road. Then, he crawled out of the truck's driver's cab. At the same time, the unbuttoned Guion army uniform on his body was also taken off by the panicked driver. Please, I beg you. I was forced to do it. That Zhuang army said that if I don't drive the car and deliver the goods they need to here, they will harm my family. I beg you. The 165-meter-tall man knelt on the ground and begged for mercy to the 18-meter-tall number 3 Gao. This difference in height made Lei Minkai feel a little uncomfortable in his heart. Get up. As long as you don't resist, we won't do anything to you. In the end, Ray Minkai's promise was verified. After Squad 6 and Squad 8 finished off the last of the enemies, the driver who could no longer stand was tied up by Aladoya and Monster. He was locked in the back of the Type 74 hover truck. After that, the large troops who had heard the news came to seal off the scene. Squad 6 and Squad 8 were summoned by Squad Leader Xiao Dao for a meeting. Amada Shiro, who participated in the meeting, naturally knew what the goods were, but he didn't want to tell Ray Minkai the truth so quickly. Because, isn't this fella who is holding a camera and showing off in front of everyone a bit too lazy? Although the main force's orders made Captain Xiao Dao helpless, it shouldn't be so excessive, right? However, what Amada Shiro didn't know was that his thoughts were already seen through by Ray Minkai. Captain Amada, do you think that I'm a bit lazy? Amada Shiro went into a daze and looked at Ray Minkai with a bit of surprise. Captain Amada, you don't have to worry about me. Captain naturally understands why I didn't participate in the meeting. As for you, you should tell me about the goods now. Amada Shiro opened his mouth and suddenly realized that he couldn't find the right words to describe Ray Minkai's current state. In the end, Amada Shiro sighed helplessly. Captain wants me to tell you that the goods transported by the truck have already been checked by the station's engineers. But due to the complexity of the goods, the engineers won't be able to find out much. What can be confirmed is that this goods is probably used for some kind of high-power energy output device. Amada Shiro's words made Ray Minkai's eyes flash. Some kind of high-power energy output device? Perhaps. Now, in this mechanized mixed brigade, only Ray Minkai knew what this so-called high-power energy output device was used for. Apsalus? This name flashed through Ray Minkai's mind. However, Ray Minkai also had a trace of doubt in his heart. In the storyline he was familiar with, the final model of Apsalus 3 was able to successfully balance the design problems of mobility, firepower, and other design problems after using the Big Demon's reactor. But now, before Apsalus 1 had even appeared, John was actually trying to send a batch of high-power energy output devices to Kenyas. This change made Ray Minkai have a hint of warning in his heart. Perhaps, in a place that he couldn't see, some factors were quietly affecting the progress of this world. All of a sudden, Lei Minkai woke up from his contemplation. Then, he also found that Amada Shiro was still standing next to him without the slightest intention of leaving. "Captain Amada, sorry, I was lost in my thoughts." Ray Minkai's apology made Captain Amada wave his hand. "No, Second Lieutenant, you don't have to care. It's just that, did you think of something?" Although Ray Minkai's title as a war reporter was used to cover up, in the eyes of Amada Shiro and others, Ray Minkai, a reporter who was active everywhere, might be able to think of some key points that they couldn't think of. "No, I just thought of something." Ray Minkai pondered for a moment. After making some considerations in his heart, he finally decided to tell Amada Shiro some of the information he knew. No, it should be the captain behind Amada Shiro, Captain Kojima, who knew. Now the situation of the war between us and the Gion army has begun to reverse. After the Rum Conference, the Gion army that had a smooth journey was refocused. The Federation army, which quickly mobilized forces, stopped the insufferably arrogant pace at the beginning of the war. As the war spread, the gap in population, resources, and even the elite of the entire army gradually widened. Some of the leaders and technicians on the Gion side may take some extreme measures. Extreme measures? For some reason, Amada Shiro, under Ray Minkai's reminder, subconsciously recalled the tragedy of falling in Sydney. Yes, extreme measures. But as the Federation army gained a foothold in the universe, Gion can no longer easily complete the previous extreme and crazy measures. Therefore, they need some powerful weapons. Lei Minkai nodded. He tried his best to lead Shiro Amada's guest to the direction of a large, terrifying, and destructive weapon by hinting at it from the side. Powerful weapons? Could it be that Gion wants to create some powerful weapons to accurately strike our Federation's important military targets and force our Federation army to surrender? Under Ray Minkai's guidance, Amada Shiro immediately understood the crux of the matter. Perhaps that will be the case. Otherwise, with just the specifications of the MS, they will still need to use a high-power energy output device. Furthermore, these devices will need to be escorted by an elite force? After a pause, Ray Minkai laughed. I believe Captain Amada still remembers the strength displayed by the enemy during the battle during the day, right? Amada Shiro fell silent. After a while, Amada Shiro nodded and saluted Ray Minkai. "Thank you for your guidance. Now, I have to report to the captain." "No, this is what I should do." Looking at Amada Shiro's back as he turned around and left, Ray Minkai secretly shook his head. The reason why Amada Shiro suddenly appeared here was probably because of Captain Kojima's instructions. Otherwise, wouldn't it be more convenient for Leorut, who was more familiar with Ray Minkai, to come and ask? It really is, as the saying goes, the older, the wiser. The camera in his hand was raised again, but Ray Minkai's gaze was fixed on the snowy mountains that stretched for thousands of miles in the distance. Sure enough, Ray Minkai's speculation attracted the attention of Captain Kojima. After Kojima asked for instructions from headquarters, the investigation mission fell on the 8th Squad. And the 6th Squad that Ray Minkai was in went into standby mode, waiting for the next order. This result was not out of Ray Minkai's expectations. After all, it was just an investigation mission. There was no need to mobilize two teams that were both using Landfighter Gundams. Therefore, in the station of the Mechanized Mixed Brigade, Ray Minkai was once again seen walking around with a camera. In this regard, Captain Kojima had no choice. Because in private, Kojima protested at headquarters more than once, but the result was rejected by headquarters. They even issued an order to allow Ray Minkai to interview during the non-combat state, as long as it did not violate the military confidentiality regulations. In the end, Captain Kojima had to accept his fate. On this day, on the third day after the 8th Squad left for the reconnaissance mission, Lei Minkai obtained the permission to go out alone from Xiao Dao, the commander of the 8th Squad, to collect information from outside. With a camera around his neck and a huge backpack on his back, Ray Minkai, who left the station, walked briskly through the dense forest. In this sparsely populated tropical rainforest, Ray Minkai did not have to worry about anything. He directly let his strengthened body exert the powerful ability hidden in it to the maximum. This was not, in the eyes of ordinary people, it was undoubtedly difficult. The tropical rainforest where insects bred could not stop Ray Minkai's footsteps. Instead, it was left far behind by Ray Minkai. After moving forward for a while, Ray Minkai stopped under a big tree, picked up the binoculars, and looked at the cliff not far away. It should be here, right? Ray Minkai's purpose today was to find a village where the militants were located near the battlefield. If he wanted to ask for information about Apsaras, only the militants who lived in this area and had a deep relationship with the local residents would know. After looking for a long time, Ray Minkai did not see anything wrong. Obviously, there were no traces of militants here that Ray Minkai was looking for. Keep looking. After putting down the binoculars, Ray Minkai looked up at the sun in the sky and thought subconsciously, maybe Shiro Amada has already met with them. Thinking of the scene where Shiro Amada, who just came to Earth and wanted to achieve good results, met with Chi-Chi, Ray Minkai shook his head helplessly. In this world that has changed, will they still meet like this? Probably not, right? After thinking about it, Ray Minkai threw these unrealistic thoughts out of his head and continued to move forward. The dense and rugged jungle in front of him could not stop Ray Minkai's footsteps. In less than half an hour, Ray Minkai crossed the entire rainforest from the previous observation point and came to the cliff where he observed just now. As soon as Ray Minkai came to the cliff, his eyes suddenly opened up. The next moment, the binoculars on the side of the backpack were raised by Ray Minkai again. Found it. Through the binoculars, Ray Minkai saw that on the edge of the rainforest on the southeast side, there seemed to be a few faint smoke rising. That might be the target that Ray Minkai was looking for this time. The smoke slowly rose. Several children chased back and forth in the open space in front of the village entrance. From time to time, they waved the wooden sticks in their hands, made gestures, and slashed at their playmates. Suddenly, a boy who was stronger than the other children accidentally stepped on air. When he saw that he was about to fall into the field half a meter above the road below, a pair of big hands grabbed the boy in time. Be careful! In the nick of time, when the boy who was grabbed was about to breathe a sigh of relief, he saw that the person who grabbed him was an adult in the village, but a young man in a military uniform. This time, the boy panicked. He did not thank the young man who saved him at all. Instead, he shook off the young man's hand, turned around, and ran. At the same time, he shouted in the local language that the young man could not understand. It seems that I was misunderstood. In the boy's series of calls in the local language, the villagers who were still farming in the field took out semi-automatic rifles from nowhere and surrounded the young man in a semicircular formation. Wait, I don't mean any harm. I just want to ask some questions here. Ray Minkai raised his hands to show that he did not have any ill intentions. However, the villagers did not buy it. Among them, a skinny man with a ferocious gaze spat out. Using a language that Ray Minkai was not familiar with, he spoke in a language that Ray Minkai was barely able to understand. The Federation and John are the same thing. Whether you have any ill intentions or not, as long as you wear those clothes, you're our enemy. Clothes? Ray Minkai was stunned and subconsciously looked at his sleeve. Not good. I forgot to change out of these clothes. He did not expect that a moment of carelessness would cause more trouble for Ray Minkai's trip. Chapter 290. Ray Minkai shook his head helplessly as he looked at the fierce villagers around him. He then gestured to the camera hanging around his neck. I don't mean any harm. I'm just a reporter who came here to collect information. Reporter. When the villagers heard Ray Minkai's explanation, they suddenly laughed. You're a soldier of the Federation, not a reporter. Don't think you can fool us with that stupid camera. Among the mocking laughter, there were voices that denied Ray Minkai's identity. Although their denial was indeed true. Ray Minkai was never a reporter. The identity of a reporter hanging on his head was just an identity created for the convenience of moving around in the mechanized mixed brigades base in the Federation. Therefore, Ray Minkai's expression was very calm. He was not affected by the mocking laughter around him. He didn't even care about the muzzles that were tightly locked on him. However, Ray Minkai's calmness angered the villagers who pointed their guns at Ray Minkai. Ever since the war between John and the Federation began in this rainforest, the villagers who had been ravaged by the flames of war had armed themselves in order to make a living. From the moment they joined forces with their companions to seek revenge, the villagers had personally witnessed, captured, beaten, and even executed the sinners who had started the war. Those soldiers who used to be insufferably arrogant, piloting tanks, helicopters, and even MS, which was the key to the victory or defeat of a war. When the soldiers pointed their guns at them, the fear shown by the pilots was still talked about enthusiastically by the villagers until now. Gotcha! The bullet was loaded. Down the ground. Goddamn Federation Army. The calmer Ray Minkai was, the angrier the villagers were. Because the villagers didn't know if Ray Minkai had other companions hiding in the rainforest not far away. Therefore, a gunshot was heard. Bang! Before the smoke from the muzzle dissipated, a small crater formed by the bullet appeared beside Ray Minkai's feet. There was no doubt that this was a scare shot. However, Ray Minkai didn't make any moves at all. Moreover, from the forest behind him, there was a clear, delicate voice of a young girl. What are you doing? A group of people is surrounding here. The appearance of this voice caused the villagers surrounding Ray Minkai to retreat slightly, and the muzzles of their guns lowered slightly. However, that cold expression still hung on everyone's faces. Ray Minkai glanced at the villagers who temporarily lowered their guns and looked back at the forest behind him. A group of people wearing shabby clothes and holding rusty semi-automatic rifles walked out of the forest one after another. Among this group of people, there was a little girl who was wearing shorts and a short-sleeved shirt. Her hair was a little messy and was only casually tied up with a hairband. It seemed that the young girl's identity. Ray Minkai's gaze lingered on the little girl for a moment before he shifted his gaze towards the crowd. It didn't matter if he didn't look or not. What a surprise. Captain Amada, how did I meet you here? In the crowd, Ray Minkai saw a young man wearing the Federation's military uniform. He was Shiro Amada, who led the 8th Squad out to carry out a reconnaissance mission earlier. What Ray Minkai didn't expect was that in this historical process where the 6th Squad wasn't severely injured and didn't ask for help from the 8th Squad, Shiro Amada, who shouldn't have been captured, actually appeared here. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, why are you here? Shiro Amada, whose hands were tied behind his back and his movements were controlled, saw Ray Minkai surrounded by the villagers and shouted in surprise and joy. Second Lieutenant, could it be that you know the people here? Just in time. Shut up. Shiro Amada's surprise didn't last long before he was attacked by the gunman, standing behind him with the butt of his gun. Ray Minkai looked at Shiro Amada's defeated look and shook his head helplessly. Then, he looked at the little girl standing in front of the crowd. Excuse me, are you the leader here? Although Ray Minkai asked this question, in fact, he had already guessed the identity of this little girl. Chichi Lokita. She was the daughter of the leader of the gunmen active in this area, and also the girl who had a crush on Shiro Amada in the original work. It seemed that the encounter between Chi-Chi and Shiro Amada would still happen even with the influence of Ray Minkai, an external factor. You are also from the Federation's army? It seems that you still recognize this bad guy. Forget it. Men, tie him up and bring him to the leader. The little girl, Chi-Chi, didn't ask about Ray Minkai's identity and why the villagers surrounded him. She just relied on the conversation between Ray Minkai and Shiro Amada just now and made a decision. However, Shiro Amada would be captured without a fight, but it didn't mean that Ray Minkai would be captured without a fight. Wait, I came here because I want to see your leader. Ray Minkai picked up the camera hanging around his neck and waved it as he explained to Chi-Chi. I'm just a war reporter. The reason I came here is nothing more than to interview you and make some equivalent transactions. Reporter? Transactions? Chi-Chi was stunned and glanced suspiciously at the camera in Rei Ming-Kai's hand. She didn't seem to believe Rei Ming-Kai's words. But in the next moment, Shiro Amada shouted again. Yes, that's right. The second lieutenant is a war reporter. He's just here to interview you. When Shiro Amada shouted like this, Rei Ming-Kai's eyebrows suddenly twitched. Although he knew that Shiro Amada was still in the state of a hothead when he had just come to Earth from the universe, knowing and experiencing were two different things. Fortunately, Chi-Chi seemed to be a little shaken. You go and get that guy's camera. Chi-Chi pointed casually and called someone to go forward and ask Rei Ming-Kai for his camera. Rei Ming-Kai, on the other hand, generously handed his camera over. No matter how much Chi-Chi studied it, she probably wouldn't be able to find anything. Therefore, the result was, of course, after Chi-Chi looked at Rei Ming-Kai's camera several times, she no longer insisted on tying up Rei Ming-Kai. Instead, she arranged for two sturdy men to follow Rei Ming-Kai. Come with me. We'll talk about the transaction you mentioned later. But don't play any tricks. Otherwise, our bullets won't spare you just because you're from the Federation Army. Strictly speaking, Chi-Chi's threat didn't feel threatening at all. After all, even if she was the daughter of the militant leader, she was still just an underage girl. The villagers who surrounded Rei Ming-Kai were dispersed, and Chi-Chi also brought Rei Ming-Kai and Amada Shiro to a big house in the depths of the village. This might be Chi-Chi's house, which was also the militant leader's house. Perhaps because they were interested in the transaction Rei Ming-Kai mentioned, Rei Ming-Kai and Amada Shiro, well, especially Amada Shiro, didn't suffer any abuse. They were just pressed down on the stool and couldn't move. They could only desperately signal Rei Ming-Kai with their eyes. This was because Amada Shiro knew that if he opened his mouth, he would definitely be taught a lesson. Fortunately, at this moment, he wasn't alone. Creak! At the same time, there was a slight sound of a heavy object rolling over a wooden board. At the same time, a man in a wheelchair with an eye patch over his left eye was pushed out of the house by Chi-Chi. He appeared in front of Rei Ming-Kai and Amada Shiro. You're the reporter that Chi-Chi mentioned? The one-eyed man's eyes looked at Amada Shiro and Rei Ming-Kai, and then fell on Rei Ming-Kai. Yes. Hello. You must be the leader of these people, right? Rei Ming-Kai nodded and admitted his identity without hesitation. Yes. I'm their boss. You can call me Lokita. Mr. Reporter, what's your name? The one-eyed man's attitude seemed to be very good. As he introduced himself, he raised his hand to signal his subordinates to loosen the suppression on Amada Shiro. Of course, these gestures of goodwill were all built on the basis of the deal that Rei Ming-Kai had mentioned earlier. If the bargaining chip that Rei Ming-Kai brought out later didn't meet the one-eyed man's requirements, Amada Shiro and even Rei Ming-Kai himself would be in danger. Rei Ming-Kai, Mr. Lokita, time is of the essence. I'll get straight to the point. Rei Ming-Kai glanced at Amada Shiro, who was still winking at him, and directly put the bargaining chip on the table. As you can see, I'm a reporter. Today I'm here to interview you and get some information that you know, but our Federation doesn't. As he said this, Rei Ming-Kai raised his hand and took out an A4 paper from his pocket, put it on the table, and pushed it to the one-eyed man. Of course, if you accept my request for an interview and provide us with reliable information, then all the materials on this list will be yours. The one-eyed man, namely Lokita, didn't answer him at once. After exchanging glances with his daughter Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi took the list and studied it carefully before passing it to Lokita. After a while, Lokita, who had roughly read the list, raised his eyes and stared at Rei Ming-Kai. There was no denying it. Rei Ming-Kai's list had undoubtedly hit Lokita and even the entire armed group's weakness. Drugs, food, even weapons were the most scarce materials in their armed group. Although there weren't many weapons on this list, the amount of drugs and food was enough for the entire armed group to use for 3 months, which was enough to move Lokita's heart. I need a guarantee. Lokita opened his mouth and immediately retorted. No, whether it's the Federation soldiers or the Gion Army's guarantee, We can't trust it. Compared to this empty piece of paper, I believe in the real thing more. Looking at Lokita's calm appearance, Ray Minkai slightly shook his head. This was something that Lei Minkai had foreseen. 1/3 of the materials on the list are now at the coordinates C323. It's not far from here, so you can send someone to check it. Ray Minkai casually pulled a stool from the side and sat down, showing a look of "I've already said it, and now it's up to you." Lei Minkai's above-board counterattack made Lokita stunned for quite a while. At the same time, he gained a new recognition about this young man who claimed to be a war correspondent. Ha 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 ha. Good. Cool. You. Go to the coordinates, he said. Wait. When Lokita's men went out to check the materials, Ray Minkai stopped them and threw a hand-drawn map to them. This is a map in case you can't find the place. Although it's hand-drawn, I think you can find it since you're born and raised here. Lokita stared at his men who were holding the map in a daze, and after driving them out, he stared at Ray Minkai. I didn't expect there to be such an interesting second lieutenant in the Federation's army. Very good. Very good. I'm just an ordinary person. Leader Lokita, can you let go of my colleague now? Ray Minkai smiled slightly, indicating that he was not worthy of Lokita's praise. Lokita glanced at Amada Shiro, snorted slightly, and signaled his men to let go of Amada Shiro. Young, second lieutenant. Quickly tell them to let me go. The combat mission is about to start. Once he was let go, Amada Shiro immediately rushed to Ray Minkai and said quickly. In the conversation between Ray Minkai and Lokita just now, Amada Shiro could see that Ray Minkai already had some authority. Therefore, in order to ensure the combat plan he made not long ago, Amada Shiro immediately asked Ray Minkai for help. Combat plan. Ray Minkai frowned and subconsciously looked at the clock on the wall. 15:10. It can't be so coincidental, right? Surprise flashed across Ray Minkai's face. His mind was also quickly replaying what happened at the edge of the jungle just now. It turned out that the wheel of history was still firmly turning along the original track. The reason why Amada Shiro was so anxious, it was probably when Karen, Sandus, Eladoya, and the others from the 8th Squad were attacking Gion's stronghold in the nearby village. Captain Amada, calm down. We will catch up. Ray Minkai had just comforted Captain Amada. The people who went out to check the situation of the supplies hurriedly rushed into the house. Boss, the supplies are real. So many. Looking at his subordinate who was out of breath, but whose face was full of joy, Lokita's remaining right eye flashed with a bright light. He asked Chi-Chi to push him in front of Lei Minkai and raised his hand to indicate, "Let's go." Good. Since you have already expressed your sincerity, then we have a deal. Thank you very much, leader. But now, I have a presumptuous request. After Ray Minkai reached out and shook hands with Lokita, he immediately made a request. Is it this team captain's combat mission? Sure, but we need to get half of the supplies of those Gion bastards. Lokita straightforwardly agreed to Ray Minkai's request and raised the condition. No problem. Now can I go back? Amada Shiro, who cared about his teammates, immediately agreed when he heard that he could go back. Chi-Chi, you lead the way. Then, this reporter friend, can you stay here and chat with this old man? Of course. Chapter 291. That's really surprising. After everyone left, leaving only Ray Minkai, Lokita, and the strong man behind him, Lokita slowly opened his mouth. What's so surprising about Chief Lokita? Ray Minkai asked, even though he already knew the answer. Even if Lokita didn't say it, Ray Minkai knew what this disabled man with only one I was surprised about. As an ordinary reporter, even if he was wearing a Federal Army uniform, it was impossible for him to travel alone through the rainforest that was undoubtedly full of difficulties for ordinary people while carrying so many supplies. Not to mention, he still had the strength to place it near the village without anyone noticing. Therefore, as long as Lokita wasn't stupid, he would naturally think about this. Seeing Ray Minkai's obviously acting dumb, Lokita snorted and didn't point it out. Instead, he changed the topic and raised his hand to signal the strong man behind him. The strong man nodded and turned to walk into the inner room. Then, Mr. Second Lieutenant, what do you want to know? If you just want to interview us and give us such a valuable gift, then I'll accept it. Lokita's remaining eye flashed with shrewdness. I know I can't hide it from you, Chief Lokita. That's right. My purpose here is not as simple as an interview. My purpose is to find out the distribution of the Gion army's strongholds nearby. Rei Minkai's words made Lokita frown. However, after pondering for a while, a trace of understanding appeared on his face. At the same time, the strong man who walked into the inner room returned to Lokita's side with a stack of 3 centimeters thick photos in his hand. Second Lieutenant, you must be here for this, right? Lokita took the stack of photos from the strong man and handed them to Rei Minkai. At the same time, he slowly said, "A few days ago, there was a battle between the Federation and Gion not far from the east. The result of this battle was that the Federation seized the goods transported by the Gion army and defeated Gion army. I believe Mr. Reporter should know about this." Rei Minkai nodded as he took the photo from him. "Yes, not only do I know about it, but I also experienced the battle." However, before Rei Minkai could finish his words, he was attracted by the shadow in the photos. The shadow had a shape that defied aerodynamics, but the high protruding cockpit and the flat and wide weird shape made Rei Minkai recognize it at a glance. Dora. This was a transport aircraft developed by Gion. It was mainly used to transport soldiers and supplies. Such an airframe was actually photographed by Lokita's men somewhere in the rainforest. From the photos, it was not difficult to see that this Dora was flying above the rainforest in a single airframe. Moreover, it was flying at the lowest altitude of the flight limit. It could even fly close to the top of the trees. It's true that the skilled are bold. Rei Minkai looked at Dora in the photos and secretly sighed. Lokita ignored Rei Minkai's exclamation of Dora's pilot's boldness and continued. "That's right." He continued, "The time when this airframe appeared is estimated to be around the time when the Federation and Gion were fighting. Our informants took photos of this airframe appearing." Lokita paused and stared at Rei Minkai with his single eye, watching the changes in Rei Minkai's facial expression. "Mr. Reporter, why do you think this airframe would fly alone in such a dangerous manner over the rainforest?" The answer was obvious. Lokita's question was nothing more than a clear answer. When Rei Minkai participated in the ambush as the pilot of the 6th Squad, such an unknown thing happened somewhere in the rainforest. If Rei Minkai did not come to this village on a whim today, he would not have known that such a thing happened. "It's a cargo." Rei Minkai was silent for a while and said an ambiguous word. But Lokita did not care whether this word was close to the truth or not. He knew that his guess was right. During the battle between the Federation and John, the Dora had quietly flown through the rainforest at a low altitude in a defensive posture without anyone noticing. No one would believe that there was no secret in this. "Second Lieutenant, are you interested?" After knowing that his guess was correct, Lokita said calmly, "Obviously, the man who used his body to maintain this armed force was waiting for a good price. This was inevitable. As a militant who struggled to survive in the gap between the Federation and Gion, it was necessary to learn this survival skill. I want his location. Can you do it?" Holding the photo in his hand, Rei Minkai pondered for a while. If he could use materials to exchange for the information he wanted, it would be a good deal. After all, no matter how Lokita and other militants guessed, they would never guess that the force behind Rei Minkai was not the Federation, but a huge force from another world. Therefore, using some unimportant materials to exchange for important information was a perfect deal for both sides. Lokita did not speak and just extended 3 fingers. 30%? Okay, as long as you can take me to the destination, I can add another 30%. In the end, Rei Minkai's straightforwardness made the deal. However, before going to the destination where Dora was hidden, Rei Minkai still needed to do something. "Leader, send someone to do it. Next, I should go support Captain Amada and the others." Only by freeing up their hands will our journey be easier. Lokita lowered his eyes, but he quickly raised them again and nodded, agreeing with Rei Minkai's suggestion. Half an hour later, under the leadership of Lokita's subordinate, Rei Minkai took a shortcut from the mountain village and returned to the base of the mechanized mixed brigade. After settling the villagers, Rei Minkai was stopped by a Type 74 air cushion truck before he could enter the base. "Hey, Second Lieutenant, what are you waiting for? Your body is waiting for you." Monster stuck his head out from the sunroof and waved at Rei Minkai. "Quick, Second Lieutenant. The guys in the 8th Squad seem to have encountered some serious trouble and are waiting for us to save them." "Trouble?" Rei Minkai blinked his eyes and subconsciously looked in the direction of the villagers who had followed them. Rei Minkai remembered that with the help of Chi-Chi and other militants, the 8th Squad finally took down the base of the Gion army. Why did it become the 6th Squad's reinforcements now? Although confused, Rei Minkai decisively turned around and ran into the base. Under the command of the maintenance squad, he jumped on a number 3 Marine Gouda and picked up the gradually improved Meteor Hammer. He strode out of Naku and walked out of the base. Beep beep. As soon as the cockpit of number 3 Gouda closed, the 6th Squad's captain, Lionel, called, "Second Lieutenant, now we need to immediately go to the 8th Squad's area to support them." "Did you receive it?" "Received. Captain, I have no objection. Also, while I was out collecting, I received some information. I need to bring a local coworker to continue investigating in the depths of the rainforest after this battle." Rei Minkai responded, and then very calmly told him the results of his itinerary. This surprised Liorut and made him feel a little awkward. The local residents that Rei Minkai mentioned, Lionel, and even everyone in the mechanized mixed brigade knew very well. In their impression, the local residents were undoubtedly difficult to deal with. They were very resistant, and even when their emotions were intense, they would do extreme actions that would harm the lives of others. After hesitating for a while, Lionel still said, "In that case, let him ride on Amherst's hover truck, but we must give him an alert. Other than the responsibility of giving directions, he is prohibited from touching any equipment or facilities." After that, Liorut added another sentence. "Sorry, this is my bottom line. I'm afraid it's also the voice of everyone in the mechanized mixed brigade. Before you came here, Second Lieutenant, we had already had many bloody clashes with the local residents." Rei Minkai was well aware of Lionel's words. "Understood. Then I'll ask Amherst to bring that person over. It's right next to the forest." Rei Minkai accepted Lionel's suggestion without hesitation. After Amherst received the villager, he followed closely behind the 3 Gouda Marines. The battle area of the 8th Squad was not far, but it was not close either. However, with the speed of Gouda Marines, it would still take them almost an hour. Moreover, half an hour ago, Amherst's Type 74 hover truck was already parked somewhere in the depths of the rainforest. He also pierced the sonar deep into the mud under the air cushion. 1, 2, 3. Yes, there are also cannons. After activating the sonar, Amherst calmed down and carefully analyzed the feedback from the sonar. "Captain, the enemy has 3 Zagu, and there are still some cannons that are still operating. There are quite a number of them. In addition, I seem to hear the propellers of John's combat helicopters. 3 Zagu, is it? This is indeed a tough battle. Everyone, full speed ahead. We must join the battlefield before the 8th Squad is completely wiped out." "Yes, Captain." Their fighting spirit was extremely high. It was just a Zagu, that cooperated with the firepower of the position to defend. There was nothing to be afraid of. 22222. 100mm machine guns roared continuously. Gouda Marine of the 8th Squad, driven by Karen, raised a shield in his hand and struggled to survive under the enemy's gunfire. If it weren't for the seemingly small, but actually quite practical shield, Marine of the 8th Squad, driven by Karen, Gouda Marine of the 8th Squad, would have been crippled. "Sandus, where's the captain?" As soon as Karen spoke, the machine gun turrets above the John stronghold suddenly exploded without warning. In just a short moment, Marine of the 8th Squad, Gouda Marine of the John position, who was still powerfully blocking Karen and Sandus, instantly fell into a sea of fire. And the culprit who caused the sea of fire was the 8th Squad driven by Marine of the 8th Squad driven by Gauda Marine of the 8th Squad. Boom! As the backpack exploded, Marine of the 8th Squad, Gauda Marine of the 8th Squad, who fell from high altitude to the bottom of the water, soared into the sky and rushed straight to the Guion Army's position. Success! Under his control, Marine of the 8th Squad, Gauda Marine of the 8th Squad, kept fighting things that the former commander of the 8th Squad could not do. This also made Amherst Shiro feel a little smug. Be careful. The helicopter is coming. Chi-Chi, who was holding the driver's seat tightly, suddenly raised her hand and pointed. Amherst Shiro looked in the direction of Chi-Chi's finger and immediately saw 5 combat helicopters in an attacking formation, appearing above the John battlefield. In the blink of an eye, the 5 combat helicopters rushed above Karen and Sandus. Boom, boom, boom. Without any hesitation or shouting. The moment the combat helicopters completed their encirclement, Gauda Marine, driven by Karen and Sandus, was suddenly surrounded by dense bullets and missiles. Defend! Karen screamed. The 2 Gauda Marines stood back to back. While raising the small shield in their hands, they also frantically swept the ammunition of the 100mm machine gun in their hands into the sky above this area. Karen and Sandus were in a precarious situation. Even if the armor on Marine Gauda Marines was strong enough, the enemy was a force that could attack from all directions. In the face of the astonishing number of bullets and the whistling missiles, Ray Minkai found that even the most skilled pilots would only choose a conservative defensive strategy. There was no free time, there was no announcement. With just a simple pull of the trigger, the combat helicopters hovering above the Gauda Marines, driven by Karen and Sandus, easily forced Karen and Sandus to retreat again and again. Don't panic! At this moment, Amherst Shiro's voice sounded. At the same time, the sound of the 100mm machine gun sounded again. The bullet screens swept across the air from top to bottom, and also flew across the air from bottom to top. The only difference was that the combat helicopters that followed in the footsteps of their predecessors. Explosion, explosion, or explosion. Amherst Shiro, who was hiding in the shadows, licked his dry lips slightly. The number 1 Gauda Marines he was piloting also constantly fired bullets, shooting down the combat helicopters that besieged Karen and Sandus one by one. Chapter 292. The small mountain village located in the tropical rainforest originally stood aloof from worldly affairs, but it was not spared by the tide of war set off by Guion. At this time, the small mountain village, forcibly occupied by Guion, ushered in a fierce battle. MS. This new weapon that subverted the entire battlefield became the protagonist at this moment. Boom, boom, boom. On the top of the mountain, the turrets continued to fire fiercely at the 2 Marines Gauda that jointly attacked the small mountain village that had been turned into a frontline stronghold by the Guion army. If it weren't for the fact that Marine Gauda's strength was far superior to Jim's, he would have been immobilized by the fierce gunfire. The fierce artillery fire caused a huge commotion, constantly tearing apart the tranquility of the rainforest, spreading the news of the battle to even further places. This is a big commotion. On a hillside not far away, the 6th Squad that had just arrived was carefully observing the fierce battle through high-powered binoculars. Zagu hasn't appeared yet. Looking at the overall situation, although the battle was fierce, as the protagonist of Guion's side, the MS Zagui that once brought great fear to the Federation army still showed no signs of moving. Ray Minkai's high-power binoculars had been staring at the tall Neku hidden behind the mountain village. Maybe he wants to wait for the situation to change before using it. Leon Hart's high-power binoculars also moved over and observed the battlefield with Ray Minkai. No, it's changing. It's the top of the mountain. Unexpectedly, just as Leon Hart's gaze fell on the Neku, a battle that could change the battlefield appeared on the top of the mountain. It's him? Captain Amada of the 8th Squad. What a surprise. Under the gaze of everyone in the 6th Squad, Marine Gauda of the 8th Squad suddenly jumped high from behind the mountain and with the help of the backpack thruster, he successfully stayed in the air for a period of time. Thus, the opportunity came. Before the Guion army of Karen and Sandis, who were focused on attacking the foot of the mountain, could react, they were torn apart by the bullet screen fired by Shiro Amada's Gao. Tut-tut-tut-tut. 100mm machine guns roared in the air above the mountaintop, and the bullets became a nightmare for the Guion army. The stronghold that made Karen and Sandis suffer a lot just now was torn open by Shiro Amada, who descended from the sky. Faced with the sudden reversal of the situation, the Guion army stationed in this mountain village naturally would not sit idly by. Zaguai was on the move. At the same time, on the other side of the mountain, 10 combat helicopters flew out with the stirring sound of their propellers, intending to join the battle. Look over there. Helicopters. Chi-Chi, who stayed in Gao Da's cockpit, pointed at the combat helicopter hovering in the sky. I see it. Shiro Amada gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. With the help of his backpack, Gauda soared into the sky again. Tut-tut-tut-tut. While Gauda rushed into the sky, the bullet screen fired by the 100mm machine gun in its hand almost blocked the route of the 10 combat helicopters and successfully blew up the leading navigator and the 2 combat helicopters on its left and right. It forced the remaining combat helicopters to immediately split into 2 groups, trying to circle around from both sides. Don't even think about running. Shiro Amada immediately controlled the 100mm machine gun in his hand to fire again when Gauda landed on the ground. However, after being shocked by the effect of Shiro Amada's jump attack just now, the remaining combat helicopters did not get too close to Gauda. Instead, they split up again and used a 322 formation to restrain Shiro Amada, Karen, and Sandis. The purpose was obvious. It was to stall for time as much as possible so that Zaguai, who was staying in Neku, could get time to move out. The bullets kept hitting Gao Da's thick armor, but they could not create enough scars on it to hurt Gao Da. Hey, Shiro, get rid of these annoying flies quickly. Those Zagu are coming. Chi-Chi, who was holding the driver's seat tightly, shouted repeatedly. I know, but Shiro Amada's eyes wandered around, trying to find the flaws between the 3 combat helicopters that were besieging him, but he could not find the best time to attack in time. After all, the other party was just trying to stall for time, not taking the risk to blow up Gauda. At this moment, the 3 helicopters besieging Gao suddenly dispersed. Zagu, coming. Below the combat helicopters, a huge humanoid weapon with green paint slowly came in front of Gauda. This was a main weapon of the Guion army. Zagu, Zagu is on the move. It's time for us to make our appearance. The appearance of Zagu not only encouraged the Guion army, who were fighting hard on the front line, but also announced that the time for the 6th Squad to make their appearance had arrived. 6th Squad, it's time. We can't let the 8th Squad wait for too long. Putting down the high-powered binoculars in his hand, Liort's voice also sounded in the communication channel. Yes, under Liort's order, the 3 Gauda, including Ray Minkai, immediately rushed toward the battlefield that was already in full swing. Meanies, you come with me to support Karen of the 8th Squad. Ray Minkai, you go to the top of the mountain. Roger. After Ray Minkai responded to Liort's order, the number 3 Gauda he piloted turned around and left the 6th Squad's formation and rushed toward the top of the mountain. Although the 6th Squad's position at this moment was not too close to the center of the battlefield, the movement of the 3 Gauda's rapid movement was immediately discovered by the combat helicopters hovering above the battlefield. So, one of the 2 helicopters that were entangling Sandis directly separated and flew straight toward Ray Minkai's number 3 Gao to the flies are coming. Ray Minkai frowned and suddenly stomped his foot. Number 3 Gauda, who was running quickly, suddenly stomped on the withered tree under his feet and jumped into the air like an arrow. Immediately afterward, number 3 Gauda opened his arms and exposed the Vulcan cannon mounted on his left chest. In the next second, Ray Minkai did not hesitate to pull the trigger at the moment when the crosshair locked onto the oncoming combat helicopter. Ding ding. Boom. Once again, these combat helicopters that had just survived Shiromada's attack were once again blown up by the same attack. Woo. Boom. Although Gao De was not equipped with an armed backpack, number 3 Gao De had a heavy meteor hammer in his hand at this moment. Therefore, this huge machine of more than 60 tons smashed a big hole in the rainforest. Rumble, and behind number 3 Gao De, who fell to the ground, was the combat helicopter that was blown up in the air. Suddenly, a feeling of electric shock flashed through Ray Minkai's mind without warning. At the same time, Ray Minkai, who didn't have time to react, instinctively pulled the lever and stepped on it. Number 3 Gao De, who was running forward, stopped his body, and in the blink of an eye, he completed the action of squatting down and retreating. Who? In just an instant, a bright arc of light brushed past number 3 Gao Da's body. Jagu. Taking a few steps back, when number 3 Gao Da raised the small shield on his left arm to protect his body, Ray Minkai also saw a chilling light in the dark tropical rainforest in front of him. Boom! Boom! The roar of the machine sounded slowly, and, at the same time, the heavy sound kept approaching number 3 Gao Da. When the light from the dark tropical rainforest completely appeared in front of Ray Minkai, its true appearance was revealed. Jagu. Ray Minkai narrowed his eyes slightly. The enemy in front of him was undoubtedly the Zagu 2 used by the Jiwang Army's ground troops. However, what he was concerned about was that the Zagu 2 that appeared in front of him did not give him the feeling of a miscellaneous soldier. Instead, it gave him the feeling of a ferocious tiger that was waiting for an opportunity to devour people. Tiger? As soon as he thought of this word, a name immediately appeared in Ray Minkai's mind. Norris Barkard. This was a man with superb MS piloting skills. He once single-handedly caused the 8 squad to fall into a bitter battle. In the end, in the battle with the EZ-8, he successfully knocked down 3 mass-produced steel tanks that could threaten the launch of the spaceship and died in the hands of Shiro Amada. This was undoubtedly a man with great personal charm. Moreover, among some Gouda fans, he, Norris Barkard, and Lamba Lars even launched a catfight with the title of Tiger King. What was the result of this catfight? Ray Minkai couldn't remember clearly. But at this moment, the Zagu eye that appeared in front of him gave Ray Minkai a clear and powerful sense of pressure. Ray Minkai moved his hands, and number 3 Marine Gao Da's right hand let the meteor hammer hang in midair, while his left hand held the small shield horizontally and pulled open the steering position to prepare for an attack. Zagu eye attacked, but the bullets from a 120mm machine gun in its hand didn't attack number 3 Marine Gao Da, but casually swept around Gao Da. This scene didn't look like an attack, but like a declaration of something. A series of shots that couldn't hit at all? No, it should be said that it didn't take number 3 Marine Gao Da as a target ended in the meaningless sound of the magazine being emptied. Immediately afterward, Zagu I, whose purpose was unknown, casually threw the 120mm machine gun that was emptied of ammunition on the ground, raised his hand, and took out the heat axe. Like number 3 Marine Gao Da, he pulled open the fighting posture. Want to fight with me? Who is sitting in this Zagu eye? Even though questions kept popping up in his mind, Ray Minkai focused on what was in front of him. In the distance, the intense gunfire seemed to have increased several times. It seemed that Team 6 and Team 8 had completed the rendezvous. Boom! All of a sudden, a combat helicopter, which was forced to flee by the 2 teams after the rendezvous, was shot into a fireball the moment it flew to the area where number 3 Marine Gao Da and Zagu I confronted each other. At the same time, the light emitted by this combat helicopter also became the signal for the battle between number 3 Marine Gao Da and Zagu I at this moment. Woo! Boom! The propulsion backpacks of both sides were activated at the same time. In the roar of the propulsion flames, number 3 Marine Gao Da and Zagu I took a step and rushed out dozens of meters away. Ray Minkai moved his hand, and the meteor hammer behind number 3 Marine Gao to burst into a bright flame. At the moment when the flame burst out, it rushed into the air under the cover of number 3 Marine Gao went from behind number 3 Marine Gao to the left and went straight to Zagawai's waist. Bang! The loud sound of gold and iron colliding echoed in the rainforest, which also meant that number 3 Marine Gao Da's meteor hammer was blocked. But Ray Mingkai did not continue to fight. Even at the moment when Zagawai blocked the meteor hammer with the heat axe in his hand, he immediately changed the operation mode of the rocket thruster on the meteor hammer, allowing the meteor hammer to escape from the blade of the heat axe in time. However, even if Ray Minkai's operation was very timely, the heat axe in Zagawai's hand still left a burn mark on the surface of the meteor hammer. As soon as the meteor hammer retreated, Zagawai immediately took advantage of the victory to pursue. It stomped on the ground, and its huge steel body launched another attack. The first to attack number 3 Marine Gao was not the heat axe in Zagawai's hand, but its shoulder shield. Collide! Ray Minkai saw this and sneered. Number 3 Marine Gao moved his feet, quickly took a few steps back, and the meteor hammer struck again. Taking advantage of Zagawai's initiative to rush up, number 3 Marine Gao Da's meteor hammer was tightly attached to the ground, twisting its body like lightning, and quickly rushed into Zagawai's blind spot. Boom! They collided. Zagawai's sprint speed was very fast. Number 3 Marine Gao did not take a few steps back before it caught up and slammed into each other. Zagawai's shoulder shield. The small shield on number 3 Marine Gao Da's left arm was tightly attached to each other at this moment. The parts of the two airframes also made a low whining sound at this moment, as if protesting against the reckless behavior of the pilots on both sides. Under the constant resistance of Zagawai and number 3 Marine Gao, sparks gradually burst out from the contact part of the two shields. Looking at this situation, was it a stalemate? No. Ray Minkai's left hand moved slightly, and a meteor hammer that had lurked in Zagawai's blind spot was launched. Boom! At the moment when the rocket thruster of the meteor hammer burst out with strong flames, the meteor hammer rushed to the top of Zagawai's head and launched a fatal blow. However, Zagawai, who was wrestling with number 3 Marine Gao, seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. At the moment when the meteor hammer fell from the sky, he suddenly retreated, which forced number 3 Marine Gao to exert too much force for a moment, and he couldn't stop his body from leaning forward at all and was completely exposed to the attack of the meteor hammer. In the next moment, the meteor hammer from the sky would fall on the head of number 3 Marine Gao, the killer move. This was a killer move to kill with a borrowed knife. In the end, the meteor hammer did not fall on the head of number 3 Marine Gao, Ray Minkai, who pressed his left thumb on the manipulator that controlled the direction of the meteor hammer's movement, looked at Zagawai, who had retreated a distance. Even if the person sitting in Zagu was not Norris Barkard, it was probably the unknown ACE of the Guion army, right? Chapter 293. Colonel Norris. The Federation Army attacking the stronghold is an MS with two small teams, and is also a face machine. The voice of Massid, who is in charge of managing the stronghold, came from the communication device. From the background sound of the communication device, the battle on his side was very intense. Face machine? Heh, it just so happens that I also have a face machine here. The middle-aged man wearing a silver-horned helmet smiled and looked sharply at the steel giant who was slowly rotating the meteor hammer. It was a new type of weapon that sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain after Shea Aznab discovered the Federation Army's new type of weapon in Colony Side 7I. As the Guion Army's ACE, Norris had already seen some of the mass-produced models of these new types of weapons. He had even piloted Zagu and personally dealt with a large number of them. However, this was the first time Norris had seen this face machine that he was fighting against. Moreover, the meteor hammer that it was wielding could be considered to be one of a kind among all the MS that Norris had seen before. That was if Gouda, who was making a lot of noise in Odessa, was not included. This weapon is really ingenious. Norris's gaze never left the extremely threatening meteor hammer that was being waved by the face machine. Even if the thermal axe in the Zagui that Norris was piloting could pose a great threat to the meteor hammer, he would still be hit hard by the meteor hammer if he was not careful. Especially in the short exchange just now, Norris could be said to have figured out the truth behind the meteor hammer, or rather, how to push the meteor hammer to make a series of unimaginable and impossible to guard against attacks. Haha, come on, let me see your strength again. Such a strange weapon and a pilot that was not inferior to him made Norris have a determination to not admit defeat. But, Colonel Norris, I have discovered a new situation. Massad's voice sounded again, but Norris did not have time to reply to him, because at this moment, the Zagui that Norris was piloting was fighting with the face machine that they were talking about. Interesting. Really interesting. I didn't expect there to be an ACE in the Federation Army. After a few rounds, Norris realized that his Zagui was not gaining any advantage. Of course, the same went for the machine with a face. After gradually understanding the strange patterns of the meteor hammer, Norris began to launch more and more attacks. However, that didn't mean that Norris had a way to defeat the face machine. From the beginning of the fight, his opponent was just like him, only using his fists and melee weapons. It was as if both sides were fighters who had walked out of the arena to engage in a melee fight. Massad, what is it? Norris asked after Zagui raised his right leg and kicked out, forcing the face machine away. Colonel, you finally responded to me. The militants who had been lurking nearby seemed to have joined forces with the Federation Army. Our stronghold is currently being attacked by a large group of militants. Our defensive line is close to collapsing. When Massad's voice rang out, Norris sharply noticed that the background noise was actually the sound of semi-automatic rifle gunfire. Have the militants joined forces with the Federation Army? There's no other way. If that's the case, this place will fall sooner or later. Prepare to retreat. Massad, leave this to me. You guys gather your forces and break out. Norris made a prompt decision and didn't hesitate about the loss of the stronghold. He decisively gave the order to retreat. When the order to retreat was given, Massad secretly let out a sigh of relief. After all, today was a special day for Colonel Norris to come here. If something like this happened, it was inevitable that he would be held responsible by the technical Major General, Kenyas. However, if Norris, who was about to join the Sakhaline family, spoke on his behalf, then the negative impact of losing this stronghold would be greatly reduced. Putting aside Massad, who was both dejected and relieved, he once again turned his attention to the duel between Norris and the faceless machine. Really troublesome. The face machine, which was the pilot of No. 3 Land Fighter Gouda. Raymond Kai's gaze was somewhat serious. Zagui, no, it should be said that the Land Fighter Zagui in front of him that was designed and built for the Southeast Asian battlefield, although its performance was not as good as Land Fighter Gouda, its pilot was still a problem. Norris barked, is it really you? No. 3 Land Fighter Gouda quickly swung the meteor hammer in his hand, creating gusts of wind. In the next second, No. 3 Land Fighter Gouda's left foot suddenly stepped forward, and at the same time, his right hand swung out. Boom! Using the potential energy from his right hand, the meteor hammer with rocket propellers fully activated turned into a blur, broke through the sky, and flew straight towards the Land Fighter Zagui. Good timing. Seeing the incoming meteor hammer, Norris revealed a sinister smile, but Norris did not plan to meet force with force. Anyone who saw the menacing meteor hammer would know that it wouldn't end well for them if they were to forcefully take on this meteor hammer. They might even die on the spot. Thus, Norris's feet alternately stepped down, and the Land Fighter Zagui shifted its feet and actually dodged the meteor hammer's direct attack. Then, it suddenly raised the heat axe in its hand and rushed towards the chain of the meteor hammer. Norris knew that no matter how strange the meteor hammer's attack method was, as long as its chain was cut off, the strange meteor hammer would only fall to the ground and become a useless piece of junk. However, the heat axe that suddenly chopped down hit empty air. In Norris's imagination, the meteor hammer that was cut off by the chain and turned into a useless piece of junk did not appear. What appeared in front of him was still the meteor hammer in the hands of number 3 land fighter Gouda. As it turned out, when the heat axe was chopping down, the rocket propellers on the meteor hammer, under the control of Ray Minkai, instantly completed a few changes in direction. With just a light turn, the meteor hammer's chain was able to escape the fate of being chopped off. Ha 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 ha! Interesting, interesting. Norris was stunned, and then suddenly laughed out loud. At the same time, in the midst of his laughter, he decisively began the next step. In the face of such a strange meteor hammer, if he continued to pull away, it would undoubtedly be an act of suicide. If it was a normal pilot facing this strange meteor hammer, he would probably have died many times over. Norris thought so. At this time, the materials were strictly controlled, and the experiment was gradually entering the most critical moment. As the main force, Zagu-I, if there were any losses, then the secret research base used by the Guion army would be in big trouble. Charge! 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 Holding the heat axe, under the control of Norris, the land fighter Zagu-I lowered its head and lowered its waist, aiming the spiked shoulder pad on its left shoulder at number 3 land fighter Gouda. It was another collision. Ray Minkai's response was still to throw out the meteor hammer and once again attack the land fighter Zagu-I from top to bottom. However, just as the land fighter Zagu-I was about to hit number 3 land fighter Gouda, and the meteor hammer was about to hit the land fighter Zagu-I's head, the land fighter Zagu-I's body suddenly lowered, and with the movement of a football player, it suddenly slipped past number 3 land fighter Gouda. Boom! The meteor hammer from top to bottom smashed heavily on the ground. However, the land fighter Zagu-I that was supposed to be hit by the meteor hammer had already slid a long distance and barely touched the edge of the dense forest. Puff! Chi! Ray Minkai, who reacted, immediately controlled number 3 land fighter Gouda to turn around and chase, but was blocked by the thick smoke suddenly released by the land fighter Zagu-I. Haha, the pilot of the Federation. Let's leave the duel between us for next time. In the billowing smoke, it was a message sent by an unfamiliar voice through the International Emergency Channel. Norris barked. Listening to this unfamiliar yet somewhat familiar voice, the doubts in Ray Minkai's heart gradually became clear. The John pilot who fought with him just now was probably really Norris Barkard. He didn't expect to meet this legendary Tiger King in such a way. The only pity was that this Tiger King didn't seem to have the determination to fight to the end. Is it really the influence of that side? Looking at the gradually dissipating smoke and the dense forest that appeared in front of him again, Ray Minkai glanced at the stronghold that had gradually changed from the sound of guns and cannons to the sound of gunfire from time to time, and sighed secretly. Although this duel was unexpected, he still couldn't enjoy it to the fullest. After silently observing the surroundings for a while, Ray Minkai, who confirmed that there were no more enemies nearby, controlled number 3 land fighter, Gouda, to move toward the stronghold again. On the way, Ray Minkai also received a communication from Liarut. Second Lieutenant, where are you now? I just accepted a battle. It's very likely to be the enemy's ace, but unfortunately, the opponent ran away. Ray Minkai glanced at the map. I'm now southeast of the stronghold, entering the stronghold in 5 minutes. Captain, how's the situation on your side? It's fine. Now I'm clearing the room. It's just that the militants are too impulsive. When you come, try to be careful. Yes. Ray Minkai understood the meaning of Liort's words. If it weren't for his interference, it wouldn't be that the militants were too impulsive, but that they were all robbing John's supplies, and even the Federation's Type 74 hovercraft wouldn't be spared. 5 minutes later, when Ray Minkai's number 3 land fighter, Gouda, just entered the stronghold that still had a strong smell of gunpowder, he saw Chichi Lokita pulling the militant member who was about to lead the way for Ray Minkai and constantly scolding him. What happened? Ray Minkai walked down from number 3 land fighter, Gouda, and came to Chichi. Ah, reporter, you're here. For the next mission, I'll lead the way for you. I know a faster path. Seeing Ray Minkai's appearance, Chi-Chi immediately left the member responsible for leading the way and jumped in front of Rei Minkai to recommend herself. But strangely, when Chi-Chi spoke, her small eyes seemed to subconsciously drift towards Shiro Amada's direction. Miss Chi-Chi, the next mission is probably just a reconnaissance mission. It doesn't need that many people. So, I just need him to lead the way. Rei Minkai, who knew what was going on, smiled and pointed at the militant member who was in a dilemma. For this poor member, whether it was Lokita or Chi-Chi, both were enough to make him in a dilemma. That's not right. Isn't your next mission to go to that place? I know the way. Chi-Chi patted her chest as she proudly guaranteed that she would be able to do that. Hearing this, Rei Minkai's eyelids twitched. Since when did a scouting mission that he was the only one carrying out become a team mission? The next moment, Leo Root, who walked down from the Type 74 hovercraft, solved Rei Minkai's doubts. Second Lieutenant, the captain sent a new mission. Let our two teams rest for 12 hours and then move on to the next mission. The target is the information you received from them. The captain already knows. Rei Minkai was stunned. He thought, these people's actions are too fast, right? They just finished fighting here and they immediately set the next mission? Yes. In fact, it was Chi-Chi who took the initiative to provide the detailed information. Second Lieutenant, start resting now. Make more preparations. Yes. When he turned around to look, he saw Chi-Chi's complacent face. Regarding this, Rei Minkai could not help but secretly sigh. The supplies he gave were not even enough for someone to brush her face once. Really, comparing yourself to others will only make you angry. In the depths of the rainforest, Norris walked down from the Zagatu that was covered in fallen leaves. He raised his head and looked at the temporary camp he was in. Colonel Norris, please come here. Our commanding officer has been waiting for a long time. Under the lead of the guard who came to welcome him, Norris saw Massid, who had a thick bandage on his right arm that was dyed red with blood. His right forearm was broken. Massid, what happened to you? Norris showed a hint of surprise. Due to excessive blood loss, Massid's face was very pale, but he still persevered. He raised his left hand and grabbed Norris' arm. This is considered lucky. An arm in exchange for a life is worth it. Colonel Norris, I'll leave this temporary camp to you. Please guard this place before the X3 engine is transferred to the base. X3 engine? What is that? Norris was stunned and asked subconsciously. I don't know. What I know is that this engine is very likely to be used in the secret weapon developed by Major General Kenyas. Therefore, we must do everything possible to send it to the base. Massid's words made Norris ponder for a moment. Massid, I remember a few days ago, wasn't a certain energy device stolen by the Federation? Don't tell me that is. Norris' speculation made Massid laugh, but because his movements were too big, he accidentally pulled on his wound and couldn't help but groan in pain. Colonel Norris, what the Federation stole was only a fake. The real X3 engine is rushing here. Ha ha! Even if the Federation were to break their heads, they would never have thought that those devices with powerful energy sources would be fakes. Chapter 294. Outside the Earth-Moon system, on a certain remote sea route, a lone asteroid was flying quickly along a set orbit. This might be an inconspicuous flight during the long years of the asteroid's formation, but at this moment, this asteroid that should not have been discovered or recorded by the world welcomed a group of guests. Course confirmed, docking into target orbit. It was a spaceship painted with the flag of the most powerful force in the current human world, Gyuing Principality. It was slowly approaching this asteroid that had wandered in the endless darkness for countless years from the distant universe. The helmsman of this spaceship had superb technology. In less than a third of the original plan, he completed the task of docking into the asteroid's synchronous orbit. Captain, successfully docked into orbit. It's time to let those treasure hunters get off the ship. The black helmsman, who had 3 golden earrings on his left ear, gave a thumbs up to the bearded middle-aged man who was sitting in the commander's seat behind him. And notify everyone. Let those bastards get off the ship and go treasure hunting. This spaceship will follow the original plan and perform a troubleshooting on the synchronous orbit. The time limit is 72 hours. Let those bastards complete the first wave of search after this time limit. Yes, Captain. Half an hour later, the spaceship's hatch gradually opened. A group of humans wearing thick spacesuits with both hands on the handles of space engineering drones slowly landed on the surface of the asteroid. Successfully landed. Teams, report the situation. Team 1 safe. Team 2 safe. Team 3. As soon as the third group responded, their voices were drowned out by a burst of noise. Hello. Team 3. Team 3. What happened? The commander of this treasure-hunting team suddenly paused in his heart. Could it be that they encountered an accident? Therefore, when the commander hurriedly called for people to rush to the location of the third team, he was shocked by the amazing scene that appeared in front of him. Heavenly Father, the treasure we are looking for has actually appeared by itself. On the transparent space mask, the shadow of the crystal-clear, irregular object that broke out of the ground was faintly reflected. UC era, year 0078, August. Me, a nobody fighting for the independence of Guion. Under the guidance of the great General Julien, they crossed the dark universe and finally found the key to defeating the evil Federation on a small planet that should not exist in this world. The dimly lit underground space was dispelled by the lights that were turned on, revealing the prototype that had just come offline to everyone. This is... What appeared in front of the woman was a tortoise shell. There was a Zagu standard head monitor in the center of the front armor. Supporting this huge body that was no less than 10 meters in length and width were 4 sharp limbs that were unique to arthropods. Apsilus. This was just a trial model. Aina. From now on, you'll be its test pilot, the tall man standing beside the woman said, softly with a confident smile. Apsilus. Is this the work of my brother? The woman called Aina turned around and looked at the man, who was Kineas's side profile. Yes, but the current Apsilus can't be considered a success. We're still missing a crucial item. Aina, let's go. Now, only Apsilus can bring back such a crucial item. Kineas lowered his eyes and looked at his sister's beautiful face. Item. Aina was confused. Yes, it's Apsilus's power furnace. The current power furnace used by Apsilus is Zagu Ai's reactor. In the alternative plan, we still have the plan of using the Great Demon's reactor. But this is still not the final form of Apsilus. Kineas raised his eyes and looked at Apsilus's Zaga head. He slowly said, Don't worry. Only by bringing back that item can Apsilus have the power to launch a surprise attack from outside the atmosphere and destroy the Federation's headquarters in one fell swoop. Aina looked at Kineas, who was clenching his fist in surprise. What exactly is that item? That is a mysterious substance that our John discovered in a certain desolate universe before the Battle of Rome. That is the power of God. Kineas's eyes revealed a trace of yearning, but it didn't linger for long. Aina, go. Norris needs your help now. At this point, Kineas didn't have much intention to continue speaking. Or rather, that was the only thing that existed in Kineas's heart right now. Aina, become my helper. Under Kineas's gaze, the woman who had already changed into a pilot's uniform slowly boarded the large weapon named Apsilus's cockpit. Hatch open. Everyone in position. Confirm the conditions of Apsilus's suspension cables. Estimated liftoff countdown of 3 minutes. Kineas noticed the inquisitive gaze from the commander. He raised his hand and put it down again. He had already approved the request to lift off the various planes carrying Apsilus. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Following the spurting of flames, the entire underground space reverberated with the roar of engines. Then, under the combined efforts of the many Doris, Apsilus slowly ascended from the huge hole above until it completely flew out of the underground space and into the vast sky. Successful liftoff. Apsilus is now entering the designated route according to the original plan. It is scheduled to come into contact with the X-3 engine in half an hour. The reports kept ringing, but Kineas, who had returned to the commander's seat, didn't care about the contents of the reports. He just stared at the screen in a daze, which represented Apsilus and the X3 engine. When these two light spots converged, it would be the time for him, Kineas Sakhaline, to restore the glory of his family. Aina. Become my helper, just like what you said when we were young. Work hard for your big brother. The man whose eyes were burning with passion and madness didn't know that in the shadows, a pair of eyes was also watching him. Interesting. The thing that this guy is talking about is probably... No, even if it isn't, it has something to do with what we're looking for. After the golden eyes revealed a hint of contemplation, it quietly disappeared into the shadows. At the same time, with the help of many Doral transport aircraft, the huge Apsalas rose into the sky filled with dense clouds. Ray Minkai and the others who had finished resting on the spot also started a new round of missions. The tall and dense trees covered the 18-meter-tall Lanzan Gouda tightly, but while it provided excellent concealment, it also made the people who drove Gao to feel troublesome. The overly dense trees not only blocked the dense branches in front of Gouda, but also the vines on the tree trunks that clung to these branches were also one of the factors that hindered Lanzan Gouda's progress. Miss Chi-Chi, is there no other path that can be taken? Ray Minkai frowned and looked at the communication screen beside him. Although Chi-Chi, who successfully took the mission of leading the way, still wanted to stay on top of Amada Shiro's Lanzan Gouda, she was still chased to the Type 74 air cushion truck that was moving behind the team by the rather dignified, square-faced Learut. Thus, Chi-Chi, who had a little temper, snorted a few times. How would I know? When I walked on this path, it was quite smooth. Who knew it would become like this now? It had to be said that a little girl who threw a tantrum was indeed troublesome. But Learut and even Amada Shiro didn't care. They just looked at each other through the screen and didn't speak anymore. Ray Minkai knew that the two captains didn't want to spend too much energy on this unnecessary matter. Such a dense jungle not only made it difficult for the MS to move, it also meant that there was a high possibility that the enemy's hidden sentries were hidden in a corner that was difficult to be discovered. If that was the case before entering the mission area, they might be ambushed by the enemy. Moreover, the climate of the tropical rainforest was unstable. When Ray Minkai and the others left the mountain village, the scorching sun hung high in the sky. At this time, the sky had become dark clouds. Kacha! Suddenly, a bolt of lightning crossed the entire sky, twisting its body and rushing towards the sky. Not good. It's going to rain. Hurst, Eladoya, you have to be careful. As soon as Amada Shiro's voice fell, more and more violent lightning suddenly erupted from the dark clouds that covered the entire sky. Kacha, rumble. The power of heaven and earth was vividly displayed at this moment. The endless sound of thunder and the flashing lightning on the screen became the absolute protagonist of the tropical rainforest at this moment. Walala! In the midst of the lightning and thunder, heavy rain suddenly poured down. Captain Amada, take shelter from the rain. Looking at the torrential rain that bent the surrounding branches, Learut suggested helplessly. At this time, whether it was Marine Gauda's camera or the sonar carried by the Type 74 air cushion truck, they were no longer working. In this situation where they were blinded, if they continued to advance, they might encounter some accidents. Okay, let's stop here. Amada Shiro nodded. In the heavy rain, Ray Minkai and Amada Shiro controlled their respective landlines, held the four corners of the tent respectively, and carefully pulled up a small space that could block the rain for the members of the 6th and 8th teams. Thank you for your hard work, Second Lieutenant. After fixing the tent, Amada Shiro gave Ray Minkai a thumbs up. Ray Minkai shook his head, then walked down from Marine Gao to number 3 and stood on the muddy ground that was still dripping with rain. It seems that this rain won't stop for a while. Ray Minkai raised his gaze and looked at the rainstorm at the edge of the tent. This sudden rainstorm reduced the visibility to about 10 meters. In this situation where the vision was severely obstructed, it was impossible to start a mission, and even fighting would be difficult. Fortunately, the other party might also suffer from the same conditions. Let's wait first. Second Lieutenant. Learut held a map that was mostly soaked by the rain and stood next to Ray Minkai inside. Originally, Liord's idea was to use a blitzkrieg to attack the enemy's stronghold hidden in the depths of the rainforest, but now it was ruined. "We may still have a chance," Ray Minkai suddenly said. Then he turned around and walked over to Chi-Chi, who was sitting on a rock that was barely covered by the rain that was flowing all over the ground. "Miss Chi-Chi, other than this road, is there any other way to reach the target area?" In the face of Ray Minkai's question, Chi-Chi curled her lips and seemed to be reluctant, but in the end, she still said it. "Yes, but with the size of you guys, it's impossible to pass through. And this is under normal circumstances where the sun is good." Chi-Chi thought for a moment and shook her head again. "It's raining heavily now. That road must have become very muddy. If these guys run over, I'm afraid they'll get stuck in the mud and can't move." "Mud? Chi-Chi, you're saying there's a road through the nearby swamp?" Obviously, Shiro Amada seemed to have done his homework on the nearby terrain. Something like that. "Anyway, if you guys run there, I'm afraid you won't be able to pass through. If these vehicles can float, then it's another matter." Chi-Chi's words silenced everyone. The heavy Gouda couldn't pass through, and even if the Type 74 air cushion truck could pass through, it wouldn't be of much use. It must be known that the enemy's secret stronghold would have at least one Zagu stationed there. The rain was still pouring. The bean-sized raindrops continued to pound on the tent, creating a dense sound, just like everyone's worries at this moment, unable to be dismissed. "I'll go. I may have a way." All of a sudden, Lei Minkai spoke up amidst the vexed crowd. "Second Lieutenant, do you have a way?" Leo looked at Ray Minkai. "Maybe, but I need to keep a secret. After all, this is my secret as a war reporter." Ray Minkai smiled mysteriously, not intending to speak his thoughts. "Just you alone, Second Lieutenant?" Shiro Amada also raised a question. "Yes, just me alone is enough. Moreover, after I leave, number 3 Gouda can temporarily be piloted by Mercer." "Wait, if you leave number 3 Gouda behind, then what will you do? Even if you pass through that path, do you want to rely on your fists to attack the Guion army?" Zagu. Obviously, Leo couldn't agree with Ray Minkai's suggestion. "Captain, I naturally have a way to deal with the situation. Moreover, according to what Miss Chi-Chi said, even if I drive number 3 Gouda over, he can't pass through the swamp, right? Therefore, in order to buy time, the only person who can quickly pass through the path Miss Chi-Chi mentioned in this stormy weather should be me." Ray Minkai's face was full of a confident smile. Chapter 295. Kacha. Rumble. Lightning flashed across the dark clouds. As the flashing lightning tore through the darkness that enveloped the rainforest, it also illuminated Norris's solemn expression clearly. "Colonel, what are you worried about?" Massid ran back from the battlefield tent under the heavy rain. He didn't even have time to wipe off the rainwater on his hat when he saw Norris' serious face. "Massid, how's the situation with the sonar?" Norris didn't answer Massid's question. Instead, he looked at Massid with the same serious gaze and asked slowly. Massid was stunned. He took off his hat that was soaked by the rain and sighed. "The situation isn't good. The strong electromagnetic field brought by the thunderclouds and the heavy rain has reduced the effectiveness of the sonar to the point where it can't be used. Now, the only way we can monitor the outside world is to set up the sentries around this hidden stronghold." Norris nodded slowly but didn't say anything. However, when he turned his head to look at the dark clouds in the sky, there were also bolts of lightning flashing across them like snakes. Looking at the dark clouds that covered the sky, Norris knew that the heavy rain wouldn't end in a short period of time. "Massid, does Major General Kenyas have any instructions?" Massid muttered to himself and then said, "Yes. Colonel, the Major General does have instructions, but he still wants us to guard this stronghold until reinforcements arrive." "Reinforcements? Reinforcements in this damned weather?" Norris' mouth twitched, but he resisted the urge to curse in the end. This damned weather not only paralyzed the sonar equipment, it also made the usually muddy roads in the rainforest even harder to walk on. The huge humanoid MS had already lost the ability to walk in the rainforest in this heavy rain. If they took the risk and forcefully marched in this heavy rain, it would be normal for them to accidentally enter a swamp. What they were most afraid of was encountering the Federation army and exposing this hidden stronghold. Massid. Yes. Massid, who was carefully paying attention to the changes in Norris' expression, immediately responded when Norris opened his mouth. Can you confirm the situation of the sentries around? Yes. Massid hurriedly guaranteed. To be on the safe side, we mostly use wire communication when we set up hidden sentries. As long as we activate the corresponding communication line, we will be able to contact the hidden sentries in the surroundings. Wired communication? Hee hee. Well done. Go and confirm the situation of all the hidden sentries. Get them to be 200% focused. Norris nodded approvingly and waved his hand. I have a hunch. I'm afraid this damned weather will bring us a lot of trouble. Norris barked. The sigh of this man who had been through life and death countless times on the battlefield made Massid's heart tighten subconsciously. He was afraid that this stronghold would not be peaceful before the storm ended. Rumble. Under Norris' solemn gaze, a twisted bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, striking down towards the distance. Actually, in Norris' heart, the safety of this stronghold was not the most important thing. The only thing more important than this stronghold was the X3 engine that Massid mentioned. Let's hope we can reach here smoothly. Norris couldn't take his eyes off the streaks of lightning streaking across the sky as he sighed to himself. Under the heavy rain, even the canopy that was usually so dense that sunlight couldn't penetrate, it couldn't block the endless rainwater that flowed down from the top of the canopy. TSK, what kind of damned weather is this? Why is it raining so heavily all of a sudden? This weather is far worse than Side 2's. I've never seen Side 2 have such heavy rain. A new recruit whose collar was unbuttoned was holding a small bucket in his hand. He was constantly filling up the water in the outpost and then pouring it outside. He was angrily cursing the heavens. Private, how long have you been in the army? Compared to the swearing new recruit, the man with a scar on the left side of his face was much more normal. According to his resume, this scarred man, who was called Sergeant by the new recruit, was one of the first batch of veterans to participate in the landing operations of the Gewing Duchy. To him, he was already used to the extreme weather changes in the rainforest, so he wouldn't make a fuss about it like this new recruit. Sergeant, I'm Gewing's private who was ordered to land on Earth 3 months ago. Hearing the scarred man's words, the new recruit who was pouring water with a small bucket immediately stood up and replied loudly. However, it seemed that the new recruit had used too much force and accidentally kicked the puddles of water high up into the air, almost drenching the communicator on the table. The scarred man looked at the water that slid down from the communicator to the table. His mouth twitched a few times, but he still shook his head helplessly. Private, don't pour it. Get a rag and wipe it. Yes. While the new recruit was looking for a rag in the water that had already reached his heels, the scarred man suddenly noticed that the silent communicator suddenly lit up with a red indicator light. Mission. The scarred man's heart skipped a beat, but before he could pick up the communicator to respond, the new recruit who went to look for a rag suddenly screamed. What happened? Recruit. The scarred man roared loudly. Because of the communicator, the scarred man couldn't immediately stand up to look for the new recruit. I hope you don't cause any trouble for me. The scarred man clenched his teeth and finally chose the most important option for the mission. This is 03 Silencer. Picking up the communicator, the scarred man reported a code name and then silently listened to the voice for the other side of the communicator. When the voice stopped, the scarred man spoke again. Yes, now everything. However, without waiting for the scarred man to finish speaking, the flustered recruit rushed into the room amidst the splashing of water. Voila! In the dirty water that was full of fallen leaves, the new recruit with a panicked face laid on the ground and pointed at the corridor outside with his trembling right hand. The scar man frowned and shouted loudly. What happened? Right now. I'm reporting the situation to the rear. What are you doing? Recruit. Bye. The the Scar Man's shout didn't make the new recruit come back to his senses. He still pointed outside with a panicked expression, as if there was something terrifying approaching from outside. By what? Recruit, if you continue to disturb me, reporting the situation to the rear, we'll see. The Scar Man looked at the corridor that was filled with rain, but no one. After reprimanding the new recruit, he turned back and said to the communicator, "No, it's just that the new recruit isn't used to the weather here. There's nothing unusual. Yes, I'll be more vigilant. Yes, understood. Then I'll hang up first." Ta! The Scarred Man put down the communicator, stood up, and walked to the front of the new recruit. He reached out and grabbed the new recruit's collar and lifted him up. "Recruit, although the weather here is strange for people born on a colonial satellite, you don't have to be so panicked. Next time, if you do this again, I'll teach you a lesson." "No, it's not. There's really something. Bye. Facing the Scarred Man's threat, the new recruit shook his head, but the panic on his face was still there. Bye what? If you talk nonsense again, be careful of me." Boom! Before the Scarred Man finished speaking, the solid concrete dome above his head suddenly exploded violently. In the blink of an eye, the Scarred Man and the panicked new recruit were swallowed. In the next second, the huge amount of water brought by the heavy rain rushed down from the huge hole that had just been blasted open by the explosion. It quickly submerged the hidden sentry post in the rainforest in the muddy water mixed with fallen leaves and broken branches. Next to the gap, two faint arcs of light quietly rotated for a while before disappearing in the heavy rain. The third one. I didn't expect Kineas to set up so many hidden sentries nearby. In just a short distance of less than 1 kilometer, there were 3 hidden sentries. How cautious. In front of his eyes was the rainwater that constantly streaked across the screen, and in his ears was the frantic patter of the rain hitting the cold armor. Ray Minkai stretched out his hand and nodded on the keyboard. A floor plan marked with dozens of red crosses appeared in front of his eyes. This was the suspected target discovered during the reconnaissance just now. However, due to this damned torrential rain, they could only use close contact to eliminate these hidden sentries that were scattered along the path they had to pass through. Although it's a bit troublesome, I'm now piloting a Lancelot and not a Marine Gauda Yes. Previously, Ray Minkai was able to confidently take on the mission of outflanking the enemy from the small path because of the Lancelot. After Ray Minkai came to this world, the Lancelot that was hidden in the rainforest by Macross Demonis was activated. This rainforest might not be a stumbling block for Ray Minkai anymore. Compared to the 18 meters tall Marine Gauda, the 5 meters tall Lancelot would not be hindered by the dense rainforest. Even the Lancelot equipped with the light wing system could fly over the canopy and reach its destination. However, this was not Ray Minkai's purpose. More than 10 kilometers away from the target, continue forward. Lancelot, who was shrouded in the rainstorm, put away the 2 infrared detectors and quietly disappeared into the darkness. From this moment on, Lancelot seemed to have become a dark assassin, constantly setting off waves of silent killings in this rainforest. 1, 2, 3. The rumbling thunder drowned out the sound of the hidden sentries being destroyed by Lancelot. The heavy downpour that covered the sky and earth erased the traces of the hidden sentries' existence. The only thing that proved that they still existed was the sealed communication line that extended from the depths of the rainforest. However, even if the rumbling thunder in the sky did not stop, and the rainstorm showed no signs of calming down, the soldiers guarding the communication device still discovered something strange. "Colonel, there's a situation." The cold sweat on Massad's forehead was almost like the rainstorm outside the door, constantly dripping down from his cheeks. "Speak." The solemn expression on Nora's face did not fade from the beginning. "The hidden sentries that we placed outside seem to have lost contact. Right now, we are confirming the situation. However, what we can confirm is that we have lost at least 10 of our hidden sentries." Upon hearing this news, a cold light flashed across Nora's eyes. "No need to say any more. I know. Right now, notify everyone. Everyone, get ready for battle. After saying that, Norris did not care about Massad's reaction and walked out of the door in large strides. Braving the heavy rain, he walked towards the Zaguai that he was driving. Go, Colonel. Massad was not stupid. Under Norris' clear command, Massad already knew what he should do. Everyone, get ready for battle. The enemy is here. Under the command, the entire hidden stronghold moved. Rain, human figures, and the constantly lit headlights, as well as the huge humanoid weapon that slowly stood up in the heavy rain, became the main theme at this moment. This movement was naturally discovered by Ray Minkai, who was stealthily nearby. Have we been discovered? Under the forest, Lancelot turned on the infrared detector on his chest. At this distance, Lancelot's infrared detector was able to directly observe the movement of this hidden stronghold. Especially when the land-type Zagu was activated, it emitted an astonishing amount of heat. The heat was like a small sun on the infrared detector, making it impossible for people to ignore its existence. 1, 2, 3. 3 Zaguai? Seems like the military strength of this hidden stronghold is not small. With a rough look, other than the 3 brightest figures, there were more than 10 figures that looked like armored vehicles, as well as hundreds of people running around. Looking at the land-type Zaguai that was already activated and gathered together, Ray Minkai muttered to himself for a moment. After looking up at the heavy rain that was still not subsiding, he came to a conclusion in his heart. 1. The high-speed rotation of the guide will cause high splashes as it pushed Lancelot into the shadows of the forest. Colonel, the battle preparations are complete. Please give the order. Norris casually placed his wet clothes to the side and silently looked at the image on the screen. He did not immediately reply to Massad's request. After a while, Norris opened his mouth and gave the first order. Everyone, disperse the formation and surround the stronghold to defend. Yes, Colonel. Under Norris' command, the 3 land-type Zagu split up and led the armored vehicles to the triangle of the stronghold. They firmly controlled the best position to attack the stronghold. However, as time passed by, the enemy that Norris expected did not seem to show any signs of appearing. Chapter 296. Minutes and seconds passed. The attack did not happen, but the hidden sentries outside lost contact one by one. Massad, who was in charge of the communication center, gradually began to feel anxious. The more the enemy did not appear, the more likely the scale of the attack would be. It was even possible that the enemy would crush this stronghold with their superior forces. Colonel, what should we do now? Massad had such a question in his heart, but he knew that Norris would not answer this question at all, because, right now, Norris was staring at the dense forest where only the sound of rain hitting the leaves and branches could be heard. In a shadowy corner of this dense forest, a white figure quietly appeared. It was far smaller than the Zaga II, but it was also because of this that it was able to traverse through the dense rainforest and remove the hidden sentries that John's army had nailed into the rainforest one by one. Now, the first stage of its mission had been completed, and the hidden sentries on the team's route have basically been cleared. Then, it's time to greet the enemy. Kacha! Rumble! At this time, another lightning that illuminated the sky swept across the sky. Even though they were separated by a screen, Nora's face was still ghastly pale under the illumination of the bright lights. Massad, when will the X3 engine arrive? I'm afraid it will take another hour. The torrential rain came too suddenly. It has disrupted all of our plans. Massad opened his mouth and reluctantly said the time that even he felt that he could not accept. An hour? That's good. But Norris did not care much about this time. In the end, the reason why he asked this was probably because he wanted to know how long this battle would last. Kacha! Rumble! In the sky, another lightning swept across the sky. Boom! Different from before, at the moment when the rolling thunder exploded, a flame suddenly exploded on the southeast side of the stronghold. It was an armored vehicle. It was the armored vehicle that was following the number 3 Zagu that suddenly exploded. What happened? Enemy attack. Masad was shocked and quickly asked. However, the reply he received was that he didn't know, or that he didn't even have time to see what had happened. The only thing he knew was that the armored vehicle suddenly shook and exploded. Moreover, whether it was the Zagu that was closer to them or the soldiers behind the bunker, none of them could detect what was going on. Gather the formation and activate the infrared detection equipment. Nora's voice rang out in a timely manner, calming down the soldiers who had fallen into confusion and even a hint of unease. However, after the infrared equipment was turned on, the soldiers, the infrared detectors on the vehicles, and the equipment used on Zagu, I could not detect any traces of the enemy in the dense forest around the stronghold. Strange. Masad frowned deeply. Without a doubt. The armored vehicle that had exploded for no reason just now made Masad suspicious. Even though everyone's infrared equipment had scanned the nearby dense forest several times, they still couldn't find any traces of the enemy. Not only did this suspicion not fade, but it also deepened. Increase the alert. In the face of such a strange situation, Norris didn't say much, but only gave the order to continue increasing the alert. Kacha! Rumble! Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. The rolling thunder instantly drowned out all other sounds in the world. The flickering light flashed and disappeared. However, in the northeast direction of the stronghold, a ball of fire rose. It was another armored vehicle. Boom! This explosion instantly grabbed everyone's attention. Report. Report the situation. Masad's eyes almost popped out. Just a moment ago, his gaze happened to be in the northeast direction and fell on the armored vehicle that had exploded. However, he, who had witnessed the explosion of the armored vehicle with his own eyes, couldn't see what had caused the armored vehicle to be engulfed by the explosion for no reason. Moreover, the radio operator sitting next to Masad also happened to be talking to the commander of the armored vehicle to confirm the situation. Strange. Too strange. Not to mention Masad's own eyes. Even the commander who was talking to the radio operator didn't notice anything strange. So what happened? Masad opened his mouth and couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. If the explosion of the first armored vehicle was an accident, then the explosion of the second armored vehicle was undoubtedly man-made. Kacha! Rumble! Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, setting off a series of roaring thunder. At this moment, Norris, who had been silent, suddenly moved. The land-type Zaga-2 he was driving bent its legs and jumped toward the nearest armored vehicle. At the same time, the land-type Zaga-2 pulled out its heat axe and chopped down at the muddy ground in front of the armored vehicle with a fierce wind sound. Boom! The moment the blazing heat axe blade came into contact with the muddy and cold ground, it exploded into a mass of air that was mixed with steam and mud. Nothing. Looking at the empty space beneath the heat axe, Norris furrowed his eyebrows. In the next second, the hole was flooded by the water. When the bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, Norsley had indeed sensed that something was rapidly approaching the armored vehicle. That was why Norsley had suddenly made a move to stop the explosion and find the culprit behind the explosion of the two armored vehicles. But the result was that there was nothing. What a strange feeling. Norris muttered to himself for a moment. Then, he controlled his Zaga-2 to slowly move forward. He actually wanted to enter the forest alone. Colonel, danger! Please don't leave the base. When Masad saw that Norris Zaga-2 was about to leave the stronghold and head into the forest to engage in battle with the unknown enemy, he hurriedly shouted out, "No, don't worry about me. Maybe the enemy wants to stall for time." Faintly, Norris seemed to have guessed the enemy's intention. Since you want to stall for time, then that's exactly what I want. However, in order to prevent further losses to the stronghold, Norris decided to walk alone into the forest where the unknown enemy was hiding. And Norris' action made Ray Minkai, who was hiding in the depths of the forest, slightly surprised. "You have guts. Then, let's have a showdown." Ka! Lancelot, who was hiding in the dark, once again put away the infrared detector on his chest and quietly disappeared into the darkness. He was waiting for Norris' arrival somewhere. Kacha! Rumble! The incessant flashes of lightning illuminated the land-type Zagatu, causing Norris to feel an indescribable pressure. Suddenly, Norris' heart skipped a beat and instinctively pushed his right hand. His Zagu, I immediately turned to the right. Dang! The next moment, the sound of metal colliding exploded. It was the sound of the Zagu-I's shoulder shield being hit by an unknown object. But Norris did not see any suspicious target or figure from the camera. Ran away? Norris' eyebrows were still knitted together. This feeling was too strange. The sound of the collision just now was real. Even the aftermath of the collision, Norris could feel it. But the enemy's trace was still not found. Not an MS or a human. As soon as this question appeared, Norris denied it. In his knowledge, it was impossible for a human to be able to hide their whereabouts. No matter how fast a human was, it was impossible for them to disappear from the Zagu-I surveillance range in the blink of an eye. The feeling of heart trembling appeared again. It was from behind. Norris' hands and feet moved, and the Zagu-I turned around abruptly again, tried to withstand the threat from behind with its chest. However, the strange thing was that when the land combat type Zagatu was about to face the threat from behind, the trembling feeling disappeared once again. It disappeared without a trace. How is this possible? This invisible and untouchable enemy was like a ghost, appearing wherever he wanted to appear, and then disappearing anytime and anywhere before Norris was about to discover him. Norris's expression changed several times. He pulled his right hand gently, raised his thumb, and pressed down fiercely. His Zagu-I immediately raised the 120mm machine gun in its hand. It seemed to be crazily shooting a magazine of bullets at the surrounding area. The roar of the 120mm machine gun, mixed with the sound of the rainstorm, echoed in the rainforest. The bullets that tore the rainstorm apart shattered countless leaves and branches, scattering them all over the ground. After shooting for a while, the 120mm machine gun ran out of bullets. But the enemy hiding in the dark did not make any sound. Not fooled. Looks like the enemy is not a hothead. Norris snorted and laughed. Once again, he threw away the 120mm machine gun of the Zagu-I without any reluctance and pulled out the heat axe again. Come on, Ghost. Norris's voice sounded on the international public channel. Was I seen through? Looking at the land-type Zagu-I, Lancelot, who was hiding in the dark, once again put away the infrared detector. Even at this moment, in the middle of the cold rainstorm, the land-type Zagu-I was still like a small sun on the infrared detector. On the other hand, Lancelot, because of the advantage brought by the small machine, could perfectly hide in the shade of the trees. Compared to the Zagu-I, the relatively weak heat radiation could be covered by the cold rainstorm. Ray Minkai did not know if Norris had seen through the secret that Lancelot was hiding around him, but from the land-type Zagu-I's posture, Norris might have already noticed. Buzz. In the spray caused by the high-speed rotation of the guide wheel, Lancelot jumped up and jumped back and forth on the surrounding huge tree trunks like lightning. In addition, during the jump, he also raised his hand to eject the hook on his forearm and deeply inserted it into the trunk not far away. Under the tightening and tightening, Lancelot's movement trajectory abruptly changed from a straight line to a right-angle flight. This was the reason why Lancelot could appear and disappear unpredictably. Under Ray Minkai's superb driving skills, Lancelot's own mobility had reached a terrifying level. With just a pair of guide wheels and the hook on his left and right forearms, Ray Minkai could allow Lancelot to appear and disappear unpredictably in this rainforest environment with complex terrain and changeable climate. Whoosh! Under the cover of the dense canopy, the nimble Lancelot once again arrived near the back of the land-type Zagatu under the cover of the sounds created by the torrential rain hitting the canopy. Buzz! A soft buzzing sound was heard, and Lancelot's exclusive radiation vibrating sword was held in his hand. Through the gaps in the canopy, Ray Minkai could see the land-type Zagu-I's back and neck. At this moment, Ray Minkai suddenly felt that this scene was somewhat familiar. It was as if it was very similar to some of the scenes in a certain animation he had seen before. A giant? Ray Minkai's mouth twitched slightly, and then he shook off these random thoughts. Buzz! The guide wheel frantically rubbed against the thick branches under Lancelot's feet, and the originally wet bark was rubbed dry. At the moment when the bark was rubbed, it brazenly pushed Lancelot forward like a gust of wind. Behind me again. Norris's heart was alarmed, and his hands and feet moved continuously. The land-type Zagu once again turned around in time and waved the heat axe in his hand horizontally towards the canopy behind him. Crackle, crackle. The blazing heat axe instantly chopped through the dense canopy, but the explosion that Norris expected did not appear. No enemies? As soon as this thought appeared, the land-type Zagu Eye's body monitoring program suddenly issued a sharp warning. Whoa! Norris glanced to the side and unexpectedly discovered that his Zagu Eye had unknowingly injured its right leg. Norris was shocked, and he raised his right hand and quickly pressed a series of switches on the right side of the control panel, trying to minimize the damage to the right leg in the shortest time possible. Fortunately, the damaged part was suppressed. However, the fear in Norris's heart was growing. His intuition was not wrong, but the enemy's speed was far beyond his imagination. Until now, he had not been defeated by the enemy, or even killed, probably because the enemy wanted to stall for time. Behind the dense forest on one side, Lancelot once again raised the infrared detector, and through the large tree trunk, he could clearly see the land-type Zagu Eye's situation. In the previous charge, Lancelot's target was not Zagu Eye's back, but its right leg. When Zagu Eye's heat axe chopped down on the canopy, Lancelot, under the control of Ray Minkai, quickly shot the hook on his left arm towards Zagu Eye's right leg. While retracting, he brandished his sword towards Zagu Eye's right leg. The storm may be about to stop. Lei Minkai glanced at the black clouds in the sky, where he could vaguely see a crack. Chapter 297. The torrential rain gradually lessened. The dark clouds that covered the sky gradually revealed a sliver of golden light. It was believed that with the end of the torrential rain, the rainforest that had been covered by the torrential rain would finally see the light of day again. The rain has stopped. Norris, who was sitting in the Zagu Eye, slowly spat out these words. He understood that the torrential rain and the darkness that shrouded the rainforest would be the best cover for the enemy hiding in the depths of the forest. However, as long as he persevered for a little while longer, perhaps the sunlight that broke through the dark clouds would allow Norris to catch a glimpse of the enemy's true appearance. It might even bring the hope of victory into Norris' hands. The rain has stopped. The same words sounded again. The only difference was that compared to Norris, who was preparing to launch an attack the moment the sunlight returned to the rainforest, Ray Minkai, who was using the darkness and torrential rain to hide Lancelot, was much more relaxed. For him, the torrential rain and darkness were the best, but they were not absolute. With the help of the strong guide wheels and hook claws, Lancelot was able to freely travel through the rainforest, even without the cover of the torrential rain and darkness. Whoosh! A slight sound of the air being torn apart was heard. Following that, Lancelot's hook claw shot out was tightly embedded in a thick tree trunk. In the next moment, Lancelot flew out from the shadows of the forest. He somersaulted in the air and landed lightly on top of a tree branch. Ka! With a soft sound, the two infrared detectors on Lancelot's chest popped out again. Beep beep. Ray Minkai's eyes lit up. The image that appeared in front of him from the infrared detectors gave Ray Minkai a pleasant surprise. I didn't think that your teammate would be so impatient. Ray Minkai smiled lightly. Lancelot once again put away the infrared detectors. He turned around and disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Immediately after, a shadow silently appeared behind the Zagu 2 that Norris was piloting. Just as the cold, gleaming front end of the shadow was about to pierce into the Land Fighter Zagu 2's back, the Land Fighter Zagu 2 moved once again. All of a sudden, it fell forward and waved its right hand, swinging the heat axe behind it. At the same time, this Zagu, I also rolled on the ground due to the inertia of falling forward. Boom! The sight of a gigantic humanoid weapon rolling about was definitely not a peaceful one. However, Norris was able to catch a faint sound behind the rumbling. Be it something, this feeling was not wrong. Norris was certain that this time, under his control, the land-type Zagu, I had definitely struck something. Amidst the splashing of fallen leaves and mud, Norris quickly turned around and forced himself to sit on the ground from a forward rolling position. At the same time, he locked the camera of the landline not far in front of the Zagu eye. Over there, a sharp object that was so small that it could not be used as an MS weapon was stuck upside down in the puddle of fallen leaves. What a small thing. This is the weapon used to attack Zagu? Obviously, Norris could not believe that the sharp metal object that was not even the size of an adult human was actually one of the culprits that forced the Zagu he was piloting into such a predicament. Wong. At this moment, a burst of sound pierced through the air. Crack! Then Norris saw it. The metal object that was very similar to the sharp metal object that was stuck upside down in the puddle of water was piercing through the body of the land-type Zagu-Eye's heat axe with an astonishing penetrating force. From Norris's point of view, the sharp metal object that pierced through the heat axe from left to right was undoubtedly an existence that was mocking him. How could it be so despicable? Norris roared loudly, his hands moving continuously. His land-type Zagu-Eye's single eye suddenly lit up. A huge force instantly erupted from its arm, and it lifted the heat axe. Pong! A soft sound of steel cable being stretched taut rang out. It was actually the land-type Zagu-Eye that had pierced through the heat axe, and the sharp metal object that was stuck on top of it was trying to pull out the culprit that was hiding in the shadows. Pong! The steel cable that was linked to the sharp metal object was stretched taut silently, and the force that was added to it was increasing. Gradually, it exceeded the upper limit of the steel cable's design when it was made. But even so, the land-type Zagu-Eye and the culprit that was hiding in the shadows were still unwilling to let go, and stubbornly decided to use this steel cable that was stretched taut by two huge forces to decide the victor. Is it really the difference in size? The power of the guide had already been raised to the maximum power. As long as one could see the muddy water that was constantly being thrown into the air when the guide wheel was madly operating, one would know that at this very moment, Lancelot was already using all of his strength to wrestle with the land-type Zagu-Eye. However, due to the huge difference in size and the difference in power output of the energy system, purely in terms of wrestling, Lancelot was far from being able to compete with the Zagu-Eye that was 3 times the size of Lancelot. Wong, wong, woo, woo, woo. The guide wheel suddenly made a painful sound. It seemed that it had reached its limit. If it persisted, Lancelot's guide wheel power system would inevitably malfunction irredeemably. Let's stop here. Although Ray Ming-Kai was unwilling, he had already accepted the fact in front of him. Pa! The moment Lei Ming-Kai decisively raised his hand and pressed the emergency button that disconnected the steel cable that connected the hooks and claws, the land-type Zagu-2 that had suddenly lost its mutual support couldn't help but retreat under the powerful inertia. It didn't stop until it took 6 steps back before it managed to stop its body. However, at the moment when the land-type Zagu-Eye continuously retreated, Lancelot's hand once again lit up with the unique cold light of the radiation vibrating sword. At the same time, during the wrestling just now, the guide wheel that was almost damaged due to overloading still loyally erupted with all its potential, pushing Lancelot forward rapidly in this muddy rainforest that was still filled with water. Pum! In just a short few breaths, when the land-type Zagu-Eye landed on its 6th step and stabilized its body, Lancelot, who started later but arrived first, rushed out from the shadows of the dense forest like lightning. With a raise of his hand, the pair of radiation vibrating sword had already chopped down on the land-type Zagu-Eye's left foot. Slash! Under the invincible blade of the radiation vibrating sword, the the land-type Zago-Ai's sturdy armor that was forged from super tensile steel and was able to withstand the direct attacks of most of the Federation Army's medium to small caliber cannons, was easily split apart by the radiation vibrating sword like tender tofu. One hit was successful. Ray Minkai did not continue to fight, nor did he stay in the same place to observe his battle results. He continued to control Lancelot to accelerate towards the dense rainforest in front of him. Boom! Lancelot hadn't gone far when an explosion that wasn't too loud, but it was extremely fatal. Not good. Left foot. This time, the land-type Zago-Ai system was unable to suppress the damage to its left foot. This was because Lancelot's sword actually swept past the land-type Zago-Ai's knee and forcefully chopped off the left calf of the land-type Zago-Ai. The scene in front of him quickly collapsed. Nora's hands and feet continuously pushed and pulled on the lever, stepping on the valve, but in the end, he could only helplessly watch the muddy ground occupy half of the scene in front of him. Damn it! Get up, Zago. Norris tightly clenched his teeth and still did not give up trying to control the land-type Zago. I had to stand up again. Boom! At this moment, the blazing flames let out a roar. It was the land-type Zago-Ai's propulsion backpack. Under the scorching flames, the muddy ground behind the land-type Zago, I quickly dried up and hardened until it was burned black by the flames. Under the explosive force of the propulsion backpack, the huge land-type Zago, I forcefully dragged a long drag mark on the muddy ground until it crashed into a tree not far away. Only then did it rely on the tree that was knocked askew and barely managed to regain its standing position. Then, without waiting for Norris to observe the situation around him, the scene in front of him turned into a red and indistinct sword blade. Yes, that's right. It's a sword blade. Although from the scene, the size of the sword blade was somewhat out of Norris' expectations. In fact, it was similar in size to the sharp metal object that was previously cut off by the land-type Zago-Ai. Don't move. An unfamiliar and young voice sounded. However, no matter how Norris used the land-type Zago-Ai single-eyed camera to move back and forth, he was unable to see the owner of the red sword blade that appeared on the screen. After a fruitless search, Norris gritted his teeth and could not help but sigh in his heart. Is this the end for me? The enemy's intention was already very clear. Under such an overwhelming advantage, even if Norris had the powerful MS technology, he could not make up for the difference in performance between the two bodies. In particular, the information between the two sides was not equal. The people in this world did not know the existence of a small machine like the Lancelot, but Ray Minkai knew the difference in performance between the MS and the KMF body like the Lancelot. Therefore, the land-type Zago, I was targeted just like that. All of a sudden, a burst of sparks appeared in the dense forest. It was shooting reinforcements. Norris vaguely saw that behind the burst of sparks was the unique single-eyed head of Zago. Colonel, it's okay. We're coming to support now. Massad's voice sounded in the next moment. Norris was startled and immediately scolded. Idiot! Hurry up and leave. Wong. A low sound rang in the dense forest, but at this moment, Norris could hear it exceptionally clearly. Then, a burst of sparks exploded. Norris clearly saw that the moment the burst of sparks exploded, the land-type Zago-Ai that had launched support fire from the dense forest had its left leg blown off. Idiot! Hurry up and leave. The enemy only wants to stall for time. Before Norris could finish his roar, in the middle of the gloomy forest, another ball of sparks exploded. This time, the land-type Zago-Ai that had come to support had both of its arms blown off. With its left leg and both of its arms blown off, the Zago-Ai that had lost its balance struggled powerlessly. Just like Norris, it could only helplessly watch as its own body fell into the mud filled with fallen leaves and broken branches. In the next second, a burst of weak sparks caused Norris to grit his teeth tightly. Wong. In the midst of the weak sparks, a red sword blade pierced through the land-type Zago-Ai's cockpit. A burst of rapid bullets whistled through the air once again. This was another land-type Zago-Ai. Although the attack just now seemed to take a long time, in reality, it only took less than a minute. Therefore, this land-type Zagu that was at the back was completely unable to react. It could only watch as its teammate's left leg and both legs were chopped off by Lancelot. After that, Lancelot's sword pierced through the cockpit. Only then did it scream in fear and pull the trigger. Dang, dang, dang. The whistling bullets hit the land-type Zagu that had its cockpit pierced through without any hindrance. Sparks flew out from its ice-cold armor, and pitch-black holes were left on it by its former teammates. Then boom! The land-type Zagu that had already lost all of its ability to react was blown apart. Stop! Idiot! Norris's roar finally woke up the pilot of the third land-type Zagu. I go. Colonel. That pilot stared blankly at the land-type Zagu that was engulfed in flames. Pung. In the instant when an afterimage flew out from the dense canopy, a red flash also bloomed. Wong. It was the subtle sound of metal being cut by a sharp object. Ah, I can't see. I can't see. In the midst of the frightened screams, Norris witnessed the scene of the third land-type Zagu's head being chopped off. However, Norris still did not see the murderer's face. He only vaguely saw a blurry white shadow flash past. Not a human. Norris's voice rang out in the cockpit as he gnashed his teeth. Colonel, Colonel, quickly save me. The land-type Zagu whose main monitor was cut off retreated continuously. The pilot who was piloting it was even more frightened and subconsciously pressed the firing button of the 120mm machine gun. Da-da-da-da-da. The whistling bullets swept in all directions crazily, breaking the branches and tearing the leaves apart. They even whistled past the land-type Zagu that Norris was piloting. There were even a few times when they almost hit Norris's land-type Zagu. The corner of Norris's eyes twitched crazily. The enemy hiding in the dark was indeed stalling for time, but in reality, Norris had discovered something else. He was playing with them, like a cat playing with a mouse. Clang! The red flash appeared once again. The indiscriminate firing stopped, but what followed was the roar of ammunition exploding, and the surrounding area was illuminated by the flames. That's... Suddenly, Norris's eyes widened. His hands could only be seen skimming across the keyboard quickly. The scene in front of him instantly froze and was quickly magnified 10 times. That's an MS. How is that possible? How can MS be so small? In Norris's shocked eyes, the ghost murderer's face finally appeared. It was a white steel warrior that looked like a knight. Chapter 298. The headless steel giant stumbled and fell to the ground. Short and small, wielding a pair of scarlet swords, like a magnificent knight from legends. Compared to Zagu, this was a relatively short figure. This extreme difference in height caused Norris to be unable to shift his gaze away. That extremely shocking difference in height subverted Norris's understanding of the MS. This killing machine, created by the crystallization of human technology, actually had such a small form. That's right. Although this was the first time Norris had seen this Zagu, which was only a third of its height, no, it could even use a quarter of its height as a humanoid weapon. However, due to human habitual thinking, Norris immediately treated this short body, which was Lancelot, as a new type of MS, a new weapon from the Federation. Norris' hands moved, and his land-type Zagu immediately reached out to the side, forcibly uprooting a large tree that was several meters tall before tossing it towards Lancelot with all his might. The sound of the wind suddenly rose. A sword flashed. The large tree that Norris had thrown out by the land-type Zagu was immediately chopped down. At the same time, the White Knight Lancelot, who was not even 5 meters tall, slowly raised the radiation sword in his right hand and pointed it at the Zagu that Norris was piloting. A chill instantly spread from Norris's spine to his brain. However, this chill did not frighten this Tiger King who had experienced many battles. Instead, it aroused the Tiger King's fighting spirit. Hey, have you finally made up your mind to kill me? Small MS. Norris grinned, his voice becoming even more excited. Whoa, The mechanical humming sound rumbled. The Zagu, who was still holding the thermal axe in his hand, once again reached out and uprooted the tree beside him. His axe was in front, and the tree in his hand was behind. If it wasn't for the fact that the legs of Zagu had been crippled by Lancelot, Norris would definitely have charged forward and unleashed his strongest attack. However, reality forced Norris to let his Zagu lean against a tree and sit on the ground, assuming a nondescript offensive posture. However, Lancelot ignored Norris' provocation. The guide wheel under its feet moved, and it made a few rapid turns to the left. In the blink of an eye, it arrived at the waist of Zagu, whose head was cut off. Then, with a turn of his left hand, the scarlet radiation vibration sword pierced through the ultra-high tension steel like it was nothing. It easily pierced through the cockpit of the land-type Zagu. At this moment, Norris' eyes were filled with rage. However, he had no way of moving the Zagu land combat model that he was piloting. Even if it was the land-type Zagu's own propulsion backpack, it would not be able to accomplish what Norris had in mind. This was because Norris knew that relying solely on the land-type Zagu's propulsion backpack would not be able to defeat this small MS with amazing maneuverability. Cold sweat quietly appeared, and then quietly slid down Norris' face. Norris' eyes followed Lancelot's scarlet sword that had sent his teammate to the underworld, slowly being pulled out from the cockpit. The alarm in his heart grew louder and louder. It's coming. At this moment, Norris seemed to have seen the scythe of the Grim Reaper slowly raised, and like lightning, it slashed towards his neck. Yes, Norris' eyes were already attracted by the scarlet radiation vibration sword in Lancelot's hands. It was as if he had fallen into an endless whirlpool of death, unable to extricate himself. Come, White Reaper. Norris, whose eyes were filled with the radiation vibration sword, pushed his right hand forward. His land-type, Zagu, fiercely swung the heat axe in its hands and slashed straight towards the scarlet blade in Norris' eyes. Ooh. The wind howled, and the heat emitted from the heat axe actually dried up the fallen leaves around the land-type Zagu, setting them ablaze, until a whirlwind of sparks appeared on the land-type Zagu's body. However, behind this whirlwind of fire was the reality that Norris' full-force attack had missed. The land-type Zagu's right hand was raised high. The heat axe was still blazing hot. However, the scarlet blade in Norris' eyes had unknowingly disappeared, leaving behind the land-type Zagu's full-force attack that had fallen behind. How could this be? Under Norris' astonished gaze, the dark clouds that had covered the entire area began to disperse, revealing cracks that allowed the sun to shine upon the land once more. However, when the first ray of sunlight scattered in front of the land-type Zagu, the White Knight who had lowered his blade and was standing on the treetop, Norris realized that the White Knight who was supposed to send him to hell had actually focused his attention on the sky, on the dark clouds that had quietly dispersed. Then, Norris, who subconsciously raised his head to look at the sky, saw it. He saw a huge, disc-shaped, turtle shell-like airframe that was surrounded by 4 Doris, 2 Lugan tactical reconnaissance aircraft, and 4 combat helicopters. It slowly broke through the dark clouds, descending towards the rainforest that had just seen the light of day. Furthermore, it wasn't difficult for Norris to see that the target of this airframe that he had never seen before, and yet was surrounded by so many airframes, was the stronghold that he was previously guarding. Suddenly, Norris's heart quivered. Not good. All the Zagus have run out. Then, the Federation army should be in the stronghold right now. However, even if Norris had already thought of this crucial point, he was already powerless to change anything. The current him was undoubtedly like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Wong! The sound of the guide wheel turning sounded again, but it was getting further and further away. In a flash, Lancelot, who was standing on top of the tree, disappeared. The next moment, Norris suddenly opened the communication channel and kept shouting, "The troops that landed over there. Run! The White Reaper is coming. Run!" Above the dark clouds, a messy communication channel rushed into the slowly descending Apsaris. Quick! White, quick! Sitting in the middle of Apsara's, Ina's brows gradually furrowed. There was too much noise in the messy communication channel. Even the communication equipment that Apsara's was equipped with couldn't be successfully repaired. The only thing that could be identified was the general direction that the noise came from. Lugan 1, can you see anything over there? Ina pressed several buttons in an attempt to repair the messy communication channel, but to no avail. She then sent an inquiry to the Lugan tactical reconnaissance aircraft in front of her. Nope, I didn't discover much. The only thing that I saw was that the area affected by the rainstorm was too large. The rainforest below is almost completely flooded by the heavy rainfall, and I can't find any effective signs to identify our stronghold. Lugan 1, which had descended to a certain altitude for reconnaissance, replied. I got it. Increase the surveillance. Ina's pretty face gradually became serious. According to the last communication that her brother Kineas sent after Apsara's took off, the Federation army stationed in the rainforest seemed to have discovered the existence of the X-3 engine. The few bait units that were sent out before had been annihilated by the Federation. Although Kineas was confident in the bait, for the sake of insurance, the safest thing to do was to transport the X-3 engine back to the base as soon as possible. However, the rainforest below was now being ravaged by the flood, and the communication channel with the stronghold was also paralyzed because of the flood. Lugan 2 continued to descend. Try to find any possible communication channel from our army, especially the one just now. Ina thought for a while and decided to let another Lugan tactical reconnaissance aircraft descend to a lower altitude to search for any possible communication channel. Yes, Ms. Ina. In addition, the tactical helicopter is ready to enter the battle at any time. Dora also needs to be prepared to receive any wounded soldiers that may be discovered. Yes, Ms. Ina. Ina's decision was appropriate. She knew that when Apsara's appeared in the sky, even if she didn't take the initiative to search for the stronghold, the enemy would likely discover the existence of Apsara's. Moreover, if the Federation army also appeared here, then it meant that when Apsara's altitude was low enough for the Federation army to fire, a battle would be inevitable. Walla! Walla! In the raging flood, 6 Marines separated in an arrow formation and slowly and steadily advanced in the rainforest ravaged by the flood. On both sides of them, 2 Type 74 air cushion trucks were relying on the powerful air cushion engine to move back and forth in the flood. They cautiously observed the surroundings and provided timely reconnaissance information for their Marines Gouda. This was not. But the moment Apsara's appeared above the rainforest with many fighters, whether it was the Type 74 air cushion trucks or the Marines Gouda, they immediately discovered its existence. That's huge. Is that John's secret body? Everyone exclaimed in unison. The birth of MS has only been around for 1 or 2 years. The world's view of MS was nothing more than a huge humanoid steel combat weapon. But Apsara's, who appeared above the rainforest at this moment, subverted everyone's inherent impression of MS. Even the iron ball of the Federation army, which was jokingly called the Iron Coffin, was far from being comparable to this huge behemoth that seemed to have the ability to fly on its own. Captain Leonti, the target of this big guy, seems to be the stronghold we're about to go to. Shiro Amada forcibly withdrew his attention from Apsara's and opened the communication channel with Leonti. Perhaps we did catch a big fish this time. Leonti paused and immediately opened the team communication channel. Everyone, check if there is any error in the beacon left by 2nd Lieutenant Ray Minkai and enter level 1 combat state. We caught a big fish this time. Yes, sir. Everyone responded loudly. Merst, what's the status of number 3? Leonti looked at number 3 Marine Gouda, who was walking on the far left of the team. Not bad. But where did that 2nd Lieutenant reporter run off to? He didn't even contact us. Merce gave a thumbs up. I don't know, but I believe that 2nd Lieutenant Ray Minkai will be fine. Leonti was very confident in Ray Minkai. The source of the signal was none other than a beacon that only the 2 Gundam teams could identify in the surrounding area. From the beginning, Leonie didn't believe that Ray Minkai could open a path for the two Gauda teams to pass through this rainstorm-shrouded and dangerous tropical rainforest by himself. But now, Leonti realized that Ray Minkai, this so-called reporter lieutenant, was not as simple as he looked. Take cover. Zeon's reconnaissance plane is here. Shiro Amada's eyes were sharp. He immediately noticed the Lugan reconnaissance aircraft that had descended in front of Apsalas. After making a large circle, it flew towards them. In the blink of an eye, all the Marine Gauda teams hid behind the nearest tree and quietly waited for the Lugan reconnaissance plane to leave. On the other side, Ray Minkai, who let Norris go, hid Lancelot in the canopy of a tree below Apsaras. Apsaras, I didn't expect it to make a move. Ray Minkai's probing eyes moved back and forth on Apsaras, but he didn't find that Apsaras was equipped with weapons beyond the scope of Ray Minkai's memory. Is it still Apsaras 1? But it actually allowed Apsaras, who doesn't have any weapons, to come here under the great risk of being discovered by the Federation Army. Thinking of this, Ray Minkai suddenly became more and more interested in the truth hidden under the stronghold. However, in the previous attack, Ray Minkai didn't find anything noteworthy in the stronghold. Otherwise, the only 3 Zaguais would not have easily walked out of the stronghold and been led into the rainforest by Ray Minkai. Haven't they reached the stronghold yet? With this thought, Ray Minkai felt that it was very possible. After pondering for a moment, Ray Minkai raised his head and glanced at Apsaras, who was still surrounded by many fighters. If I and Lancelot don't intervene in the battle between Apsaras and Gauda, Apsaras should be able to escape from this battle smoothly. After all, Gauda doesn't have the ability to fly independently like Lancelot. So, after making a decision, Ray Minkai pushed with both hands, and Lancelot, who was hidden in the canopy, turned over and fell from the canopy in a free fall. Then, just as he was about to fall into the flood below, the light wing system that Lancelot had been hiding was instantly activated. The light wings were instantly activated. The blazing energy storm instantly flushed away the water below, exposing the ground that had been submerged by the flood once again. Then, in this increasingly intense energy storm, Lancelot's light wings flapped, and he turned into a white lightning bolt and rushed into the depths of the rainforest. Let's see what it is that could make Apsaras appear here. Chapter 299. Boom! A spark suddenly exploded in the sky above the rainforest that had just escaped from the ravages of the rainstorm. It was a Lugan tactical reconnaissance aircraft. Not long after the Lugan 2 left, the Lugan 1 that was preparing to scout from another direction was suddenly blasted into smithereens by a missile that came from the dense rainforest below. The battle had begun. Aina immediately increased the altitude of Apsaras to avoid being hit by the missiles launched by the enemy hidden in the rainforest below. Enemy attack. As expected, the Federation Army has discovered our hidden stronghold. In addition to the combat helicopters, the Dora transport aircraft followed Apsalas up. Quick! Fortunately, Apsalas was high enough to give him enough time to pull up in the face of the threat from the rainforest. What's more, the moment the attack happened, the pilots of the combat helicopters reacted quickly and fired a barrage of bullets at the location of the missile in order to buy time for Apsalas to pull up. TSK. They're really fast. Eladoya from the 8th Squad cursed in annoyance. Eladoya had only informed Sandus to launch the missile after he had made the right decision. He did not expect the enemy to react so quickly. It was as if the enemy was prepared to retreat at any time from the beginning. Captain, what do we do now? Sandus was a little uncomfortable after missing the first shot, but he still asked. Let's get rid of those annoying flies first. Captain Leonti. Yes. Spread out. 1 to lure the enemy, 2 to ambush. Hide your tracks well. Leonti glanced at Apsalas, who was gradually rising. He knew that it was impossible to fight this big guy today. If the enemy retreated so decisively, they would definitely not land again. Yes, at this time not far away, Lancelot, with its wings of light spread out, shuttled through the rainforest that dripped with water from time to time like a ghost. It stopped on the canopy and turned on the infrared detector to scan the surrounding situation, and turned to look at Apsalas, who was gradually rising in the sky. Has the encounter begun? Looks like this Apsalas is just a temporary truck driver, right? Lei Minkai couldn't help but ponder as he watched Apsalas, who was surrounded by several Doris, once again fly toward the gradually thinning dark clouds above his head. Even Rei Minkai could not help but hesitate after seeing Apsalas pull up so decisively, let alone Leonti and Amatashiro. The mysterious cargo that Apsalas came to pick up, was it really not worth the risk for Apsalas to stay? In fact, the gradually rising Apsalas seemed to indicate that this guess might be correct. Forget it. Let's search around here first. No matter what, since Lancelot had already been used, it was best to make full use of Lancelot's ability to freely travel through the dense tropical rainforest as much as possible. Beep! Suddenly, an image appeared on the infrared detector screen. From the thermal imaging, it should be an armored vehicle. Armored? If it's not from the Federation, then it should be Zeons. The only ones who could move about in this rainforest were either the Federation or Jiwon. As for the armed natives, they could not afford to feed a gas guzzler like an armored vehicle. Lancelot retracted the light wings on his back. Amidst the splashing of water, Lancelot completed a beautiful landing. Then, Lancelot raised his left arm, and the hook on his forearm popped out and pierced into the trunk of the tree next to him. At the same time, it also pulled Lancelot up. In the next second, Lancelot once again alternated between using the guide wheel and the hook to quickly move in the rainforest. He quickly rushed toward the target that seemed to be an armored vehicle. "Colonel, are you okay?" In the previous battle, Massid had not piloted a land-type Zaga 2. Instead, he had sat in an armored vehicle and brought 2 land-type Zaga 2s to rescue Norris. What he didn't expect was that this method allowed him to escape a calamity. When Lancelot was fighting with the 2 Zaguais, Massid mysteriously hid the armored vehicle, carrying him, and watched the whole process of Lancelot killing the 2 Zaguais. After Lancelot left, Massid, who was still in shock, quickly called the driver of the armored vehicle to rescue Norris from the half-paralyzed Zagai. Fortunately, after being rescued, Norris did not pursue Massid's responsibility. Instead, he urged Massid to contact Apsaras and the escort force of the so-called X3 engine. Therefore, while contacting Apsaras and the escort force of the X3 engine, Norris, Massid, and the others tried their best to get closer to the approximate location of the escort force. However, unfortunately, Norris, who was lucky enough to escape from the scythe of the Grim Reaper, did not have the luck of surviving a disaster. Instead, he encountered Lancelot once again. However, Norris did not expect this to happen. Buzz! A beam of light appeared out of nowhere and hit the half-meter deep water in front of the armored vehicle. Boom! The water splashed several meters high, and the mud mixed in the water covered the front windshield of the armored vehicle. The driver, whose vision was blocked, panicked and ran into a big tree next to him. "What's going on? What are you doing?" Massid, whose head was bleeding from the violent collision, did not even have time to hold his fallen eye as he cursed. "Shut up. We're being watched." Norris took a deep breath. "Let's get out. They don't want to kill us now." Once he got out of the car, Norris was stunned. There was no one outside, and there was no MS as Norris imagined. It was as if the collision of the armored vehicle was caused by the driver's carelessness. However, Norris had clearly heard the sound of a huge explosion. Looking back, the front of the car that had crashed into the tree trunk was still covered in mud. It was not a place that could be hit by the mud when driving normally. After looking around, Norris turned around and asked Massid, "How far are we from our destination?" Massid just took out a handkerchief and covered the wound on his forehead. He looked around and shook his head slightly. Seeing this, Norris returned to the car and looked at the driver, who was trying to restore the armored vehicle to normal. The driver, who was trying to restart the armored vehicle and leave this place as soon as possible, shouted with sweat dripping down his forehead, "Colonel, I need some time." Norris nodded. "Go do it. At this moment, Norris was anxious, but he did not show much emotion on his face. But the anxious Norris did not know that he had once again dodged the scythe of the Grim Reaper. The explosion just now was undoubtedly from the Vari's rifle in Lancelot's hands. But when Lancelot fired the first bullet to force the armored vehicle to stop, Lancelot's infrared detector seemed to have discovered some new targets. After weighing the pros and cons, Ray Minkai decided to let go of the poor armored vehicle and move further ahead. While moving quickly, Ray Minkai was even more surprised to see that Apsalas, which should have risen above the clouds, was actually showing signs of descending again. Could it be that cargo? In an instant, Ray Minkai connected the dots. After thinking carefully, Ray Minkai could not help but increase the speed of Lancelot. He even opened the light wings again and flew like lightning in the rainforest. Signal confirmed. Identity confirmed. It is indeed what Major General Kenyas wants. Send out a Dora transport plane. Apsalas is in charge of guarding. After many attempts, Ina finally managed to contact the escort team that was supposed to transport the X-3 engine to the secret base, but was blocked by the heavy rain on the way. Looking from the sky, the road ahead had been completely blocked by the flood. The only feasible solution was to use the accompanying Dora transport plane to load the cargo and return to the base as quickly as possible. Apsalas, on the other hand, had become a cover for the X-3 engine due to INA's decision. She had reason to believe that as long as any Federation army saw Apsala's huge body, they would all focus their attention on him. Therefore, the Dora transport plane would also quietly send the X-3 engine back to the base under Apsala's cover. Moreover, when the Dora transport plane began to descend, there was some noise, but the general meaning of the communication could be heard clearly in the internal communication channel. This is Norris Barkard, who is commanding the Guion army over there. Please answer me. Right now, you are sending yourself to death. Tell me, who do you belong to? Norris Barkard. Hearing this somewhat chaotic and unfamiliar male voice, Ina was suddenly stunned, but she quickly remembered that Kenyas mentioned a certain guard that was specially assigned to her. And this guard's name was Norris Barkard. Colonel Norris Barkard, right? I am Ina Sakhaline. I am currently carrying out the mission of recovering the X-3 engine. Please assist me. After confirming the other party's identity, Ina immediately felt a surge of confidence in her heart. Perhaps she should be able to successfully complete this recovery mission. But what Ina didn't know was that after she revealed her identity, Norris, who was struggling to get out of the armored vehicle that was submerged in the 1-meter-deep flood, was also looking at Apsalas in the sky with a face full of surprise. Ina Sakhaline, Colonel. That is Major General Kenya's sister, Ina Sakhaline. I didn't expect this beautiful lady to personally come to carry out the mission. Massad's voice came out from the armored vehicle. It didn't matter if he didn't say it, but when Massad said it, Nora's heart tightened. Miss Ina, leave this area immediately. Leave this to us. After Norris quickly issued his warning, he decisively recounted everything that had happened to them in the shortest and most concise manner possible. What? A small MS? How is that possible? The small MS that Norris mentioned was less than 5 meters. No, it could already be described as a super small MS. In the eyes of Ina, the test pilot, it was simply impossible. Not to mention, Ina herself had a genius brother, Kenyas, as the backing of knowledge. Therefore, under the familiar rules of the MS, Ina didn't believe that there would be an MS that was less than 5 meters in this world. At least, there wouldn't be one yet. Massad, the escort team should be escorted by Zagu, right? Norris silently put down the communicator, and after a moment of silence, he returned to the cabin and asked Massad while looking at him. Yes, there should be, but with the current situation, I'm not sure, and I can't guarantee that the escort team's strength is still intact. The uncertainty in Massad's tone didn't dispel Norris' plan at this time, but instead made him more determined. Full speed ahead. Find the escort team as soon as possible before Apsaras is attacked. Now I need a Zagu. Next, the search process was smooth. As long as Norris and the others slightly raised their heads, They could see the Dora transport plane slowly descending, and using it as a target, they quickly approached their destination. In the end, under the continuous wailing of the heavily damaged armored vehicle that even began to leak water, Norris and the others finally met up with the escort team when the Dora transport plane slowly landed on a flat area that wasn't flooded yet. "Quick, give me that Zagu. Then, prepare as many high-explosive bombs as possible." As soon as he jumped out of the car, Norris waved his hand and shouted his order loudly. He then took the land Zagu that was squatting not far away. Although the soldiers of the escort team were somewhat confused after seeing the logo on Norris' collar and chest, they began to prepare. Meanwhile, the pilot whose mech body was snatched away by Norris also stood up straight. After giving Norris a military salute, he simply turned around and left. "Colonel, do you still want to fight that white demon?" Massid, who was one step behind, saw Norris once again walking towards the land Zagu and immediately rushed up to try to stop Norris. "Yes, I want to settle the score with that white demon." Norris' voice was very hoarse, but it was full of fighting spirit. "You know, my previous failure wasn't for nothing. Massid, maybe I've already found the weakness of that white demon." Norris looked up at Apsaras that was still hovering in the sky. At this moment, Norris, who had already calmed down, guessed Ina's intention. Then, on the first day of his job, and as Ina Sakaline's guard, Norris felt that he had to be in the most perfect state on the first day of his job. Hum, hum, hum. The land-type Zagatus nuclear furnace let out a series of low humming noises. Several rays of light lit up in front of Norris' eyes, and the scenery outside was reflected in his eyes. Then, under Norris' control, the land Zagu that had a new owner picked up the 120mm machine gun filled with high-explosive bombs and stood up from the flood and once again walked towards the rainforest in front of it. Norris didn't know where the white demon would be, but he knew that as long as Apsaras was flying in the sky for a minute, then the white demon would inevitably appear in front of him. "Come on, white demon. This time, let me see if the Grim Reaper's scythe will still come for me." Chapter 300. In a dense forest, a pair of eyes were quietly watching the many Guion soldiers who were sending a tightly wrapped container to the Dora transport plane. "Found it." From the faces of these nervous Guion soldiers, it was not difficult for Ray Minkai to see that this should be the mysterious cargo that would appear in the secret stronghold. However, due to Ray Minkai's intervention and the weather, this mysterious cargo was not discovered by Ray Minkai until now. However, this was not much different from the original result. Rumble! The roar of an engine came from the sky. It was the Dora transport plane again. It seemed that after observing for a while, the Dora transport team hovering around Aputhalas finally made up their minds. They sent out another Dora transport to pick up everyone except for the mysterious cargo. This might be Ray Minkai's opportunity. However, just as Lancelot was about to rush out of the dense forest where he was hiding, a sense of crisis suddenly exploded in Ray Minkai's mind. Buzz! The guiding wheel immediately let out a low roar and pushed Lancelot away from his original position with a powerful force. Da-da-da-da! Almost instantly, a barrage of bullets whizzed through the depths of the dense forest at the same time as the gunshots. The canopy where Lancelot was originally hiding was destroyed in a few seconds. Was I discovered? Lancelot jumped a few times and flashed into the denser and darker dense forest below. However, Lancelot's rapid maneuver did not hide his whereabouts. Instead, in the next second, the canopies on Lancelot's route suffered the same fate. That was, they were wantonly torn apart by the barrage of bullets. Among the broken branches and leaves flying in the sky, bright yellow trajectories kept flashing, shooting the whistling bullets deeper into the dense forest. On the other side, Lancelot was also moving around in this barrage of bullets, moving quickly. Lancelot is being targeted. Ray Minkai did not stop for a moment. He constantly issued new instructions to control Lancelot to quickly shuttle and dodge in this rainforest. No matter how dense and terrifying the barrage behind him was, Lancelot, who was galloping in front, was still unscathed. So fast. However, I have already seen through your weakness. White Devil. Click. As the huge magazine with faint smoke fell off the 120mm machine gun, Norris's eyes also showed a hint of understanding. Yes, although Lancelot's performance before was so amazing, there was still a fact that could not be avoided. That was that its body, which was less than 5 meters tall, would not and could not be fitted with too much armor. In fact, in order to ensure strong mobility, the armor might be forced to be reduced to a certain extent. Therefore, Norris believed that the 120mm machine gun equipped Zagu I was enough to suppress Lancelot. Of course. Suppressed, of course. It was not that Norris did not want to kill Lancelot, but he could not do it. In front of Lancelot, who was as agile as a monkey, the huge Zagu, I was simply an extraordinarily clumsy elephant. In this situation, where the difference in mobility was so great, if Lancelot wanted to escape, the Zagu, I would not be able to catch up. It could only look at the flying leaves and sand and helplessly sigh. But now, Norris knew that Lancelot's goal was probably the X3 engine they were transporting. Therefore, with this goal in mind, Norris was confident that he could delay Lancelot so that the emergency transfer at the rear could proceed smoothly. A brand new magazine was reloaded. Norris took a deep breath and focused his attention on scanning the darkness of the forest. Then, he pulled the trigger. Another barrage of bullet screens was launched, but Lancelot was nowhere to be seen in front of the barrage of bullet screens. Norris furrowed his brows for a moment before relaxing them. Immediately after, the Zagu I put down the 120mm machine gun in its hands and took 2 steps back. The single eye slowly turned left and right a few times before it retreated again. One step by step, it maintained a cautious posture as it retreated. The 120mm machine gun in its hands was slightly lowered, and the muzzle was always ready to be raised and fired at any time. Norris' idea was simple. Since the Zagu Eye's speed and agility could not compare to Lancelot's, then he would directly use the stupidest method, which was to only defend around the escort team and buy time for the Dora transport aircraft to load. Norris did not think that he was very good at this point, and he knew that the enemy would definitely have guessed it. But this might be the best method that Norris could think of at the moment. This tropical rainforest was no longer the home ground of the Zagu Eye, but the smaller and more mobile Lancelot's home ground. Its height was no more than 5 meters, but in this tropical rainforest that was more than 20 meters tall, it was like a fish in water. Did it become a turtle? Not far away. Lancelot hid in the canopy of a big tree. Ray Minkai's eyes fell on the screen as he watched the thermal image of the Zagu I gradually retreating. After a moment of silence, Ray Minkai laughed. As long as you stay close to them, do you think Lancelot can't seize the mysterious goods? Isn't it too simple? Lancelot flipped his hands and put the radiation vibroblade back into the scabbards on both sides of the cockpit. Then, Lancelot's right hand touched his waist, and the Vari's rifle that he rarely used appeared in his hand. Lancelot raised the Vari's rifle with both hands and pointed it at Apsalas that was still hovering above the rainforest. Buzz! There was a slight buzzing sound, and the body of the Vari's rifle immediately unfolded into a bracket-like mechanism. In a few seconds, it transformed from a backward extending posture to a forward extending posture and wrapped around the muzzle. In the blink of an eye, the bracket-like mechanism merged with the muzzle, and the barrel more than doubled from its original length of more than 1 meter. At the same time, a high-precision optical scope with a precision design style popped out from the top of the Vari's rifle. Beep, beep. While the Vari's rifle unfolded into this new form, Ray Minkai also saw a moving aperture in front of him. In just a few seconds, it quickly stopped in the center of the screen and caught Apsalas in the sky. Royd, let me see how powerful your new toy is. This was a new weapon that Royd designed after receiving part of the MS information from the UC era, especially the information about the sniper gem. The small body of the Lancelot and the other KMF machines allowed them to take the initiative in certain environments. But the most important factor, firepower, was a bit of a pity. It was not that there were no KMF machines that could achieve high firepower, but they were all concentrated in the hands of very few people. The rest of the people, especially the soldiers, used KMF machines at best were rocket launchers. This kind of approach, idea, and design concept was nothing, but after coming into contact with other worlds that also used mechas for war, Royd knew. The ideals he held on to had no end. Therefore, Royd, who was unwilling to admit defeat, began a new round of design. The Vari's rifle used by Lancelot at the moment was Royd's trial work after his worldview was impacted. The Vari's Rifle Model 3 was a new weapon designed to adapt to and meet the multiple combat requirements in complex battlefield environments by combining various components installed on the gun body. Now, it was time for Lancelot to use the long-range sniping ability. However, when Ray Minkai was ready and waiting for the Dora transport plane carrying the mysterious cargo to appear, a violent explosion suddenly came from the other side of the escort force. At the same time, before the sound of the explosion had completely subsided, an even more intense battle followed. Is it Shiro Amada? A trace of surprise flashed in Ray Minkai's eyes. He didn't expect them to come so quickly. However, when he thought about it, a Pusilas in the sky was like the brightest star in the night sky. It was impossible to ignore him, as long as he was used as a road sign. Even if Shiro Amada and the others didn't know the situation here, they would probably think that the thing they were looking for would appear here. Then, what are you going to do? Mr. Tiger King of Gion. The arrival of Shiro Amada and the others didn't affect Ray Minkai's next move. On the contrary, he was more curious about Norris's choice. Damn it, the Federation's main force found this place so quickly? Norris gritted his teeth. Massid, how long will the loading operation take? A trace of hesitation flashed across Norris's face, but he still asked in the end. 5 minutes. It'll only take 5 minutes to complete. Massid knew the current situation was urgent, so he quickly gestured. 5 minutes? Norris showed a trace of hesitation in his eyes. Now, he was faced with a choice. Should he turn around and face the Federation's main force? Or should he stay here and guard against that terrifying small aircraft sneak attack? To the current Norris, these two choices were incomparably difficult, because, no matter which one he chose, it meant that the Doral transport aircraft would be exposed to another wave of enemies. Norris couldn't take this risk. However, just as Norris was in a dilemma, INA's voice suddenly sounded. Colonel Norris, I'll be in charge of the Federation's main force. Although a Pusilas doesn't have any weapons installed, its armor should be able to withstand for a while. Miss Ina, please don't. Our mission is only to bring the X-3 back. There's no need to bring this aircraft. Norris paused, quickly searching for a suitable adjective in his heart, and continued. There's no need to bring this precious experimental aircraft into a dangerous situation. But this X-3 engine is especially important to Brothers' research. We must bring it back. Ina remembered what Kenya's told her before leaving and immediately denied Norris' words. She directly lowered a Pusilas altitude and rushed towards the Gauda that Shiro Amada was piloting like a rapidly falling meteor. Hey, don't be so agitated. Apsara's sudden attack startled Lei Minkai, as well as Shiro Amada, who was fighting with the escort team. Captain Amada, disperse. Leo's eyes widened as he loudly warned. Whoosh, whoosh. The moment the huge Apusilas fell rapidly, it was as terrifying as a comet falling to Earth. In just a blink of an eye, Apusilas fell to the area where the 6th and 8th teams were fighting with the escort team. Then, Ina's gaze focused, and her right hand pressed a button without hesitation. Boom! A strong stream of particles rushed out from the bottom of Apusilas and created a terrifying particle storm in the narrow distance between Apusilas and the ground. The power of this particle storm was so strong that it could instantly raise the dense forest where the 6th and 8th teams were hiding to the ground and blow away all 6 Gauda. In an instant, the area within 100 meters with Apusula's as the center was turned into a mess. Seeing it with my own eyes and watching anime are two different things. Through the sniping scope, Ray Minkai also saw the moment Apusula's went berserk. Although this model of Apusula's was not equipped with weapons, it could indeed take care of most threats by surprise. Tot-a-tot. Suddenly, a burst of fire exploded in the dense forest behind Lancelot. It was machine gun fire. Although with chips and leaves were flying around Lancelot, Ray Minkai remained unmoved. This was because he knew that the shooting wasn't aimed at him. It was just a meaningless and random shooting. In other words, the opponent did not find Lancelot's trace and was just shooting at the dense forest. The purpose of this was not to force Lancelot out, but to stall for time. Yes, Apusula's suddenly went berserk and blew away the 6th and 8th teams, temporarily losing their combat power. Now, only Lancelot could pose a threat to the Dora transport aircraft. As long as they could delay Lancelot, the Dora transport aircraft would safely take off. However, no matter when it was, reality was always cruel. Boom! With the X-3 engine installed, the Dora transport aircraft lifted off. Apusula's restrained the 6th and 8th teams. While Norris took another Zagu, I to quickly close in on the area where Lancelot was. He did not hesitate to pour out all the ammunition in his hand, showing a posture of not giving up until the rainforest was razed to the ground. Tot-a-tot. The whistling bullets frantically broke through the trees in front of them. Wood chips splashed as they brushed past Lancelot. Seeing more and more bullets fly past Lancelot, Nora's heart calmed down a little. As long as he continued to maintain this intensity of fire suppression, even Lancelot, with excellent maneuverability, would not have a chance to cause any trouble to the Dora transport aircraft. Little did he know that it was just as he had said before. The ideal was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. Amidst this barrage of bullets, the small, pure white body suddenly flipped over and raised the 5-meter-long rifle in its hand amidst the dense barrage of bullets. Tot-a-tot, tot-a-tot, boom, boom. At this moment, the high-explosive bullets fired by the 2 Zagu hit Lancelot without any accident and set off a burst of explosions that was enough to destroy Lancelot. Did it work? Norris' eyes widened slightly. He never thought that Lancelot would actually stop and turn around at this critical moment, raise the muzzle, and assume a shooting posture. Isn't this courting death? As soon as this thought appeared, it was shattered by a beam of light that broke through the thick smoke caused by the explosion of the high-explosive bullets. Buzz! This beam of light unexpectedly broke through the smoke and flew past the 2 Zagu toward the sky behind them. Not good. The Dora transport aircraft. Norris's eyes were suddenly filled with shock. The next second, the Dora transport aircraft with the X-3 engine was like a bird with broken wings, plunging into the rainforest below. Chapter 301. Under the setting sun, the huge Apsaras dragged a trail of smoke and slowly landed in a dense forest with few people. Kazila, with a soft sound of mechanical movement and a burst of deflation, the cockpit of this huge Apsaras slowly opened. A girl wearing a Guion pilot uniform also walked out of the gradually opened door. And the first thing she did when she walked out of the cockpit was to immediately look at the outer armor on the right side of Apsaras, only to see that there was a land-type Zagu with only the upper body hanging there. Colonel Norris, are you okay? Looking at the broken and dazzling wounds on the land-type Zagu, the girl's eyes showed a trace of horror. She couldn't help but recall the scene not long ago. It was the moment when the X-3 engine was finally loaded and the Dora transport plane that took off quickly was shot down. How is this possible? The light beam that shot down the Dora transport plane gradually faded, and the thick smoke that was broken by it also dispersed the fog that shrouded Lancelot at this moment. And in this rapidly dispersing thick fog, a translucent light shield with flowing fluorescence blocked between Lancelot and the two land-type Zagu eye in a way that was beyond Nora's current understanding. Although he didn't understand how this light shield appeared, as long as he saw that under the light shield, Lancelot was unscathed, Norris knew that his and his teammates' attacks didn't cause much damage to the opponent at all. Attack! 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 Without hesitation, Norris, who didn't feel frustrated because of the Dora transport plane that landed in the rainforest, immediately shouted out his thoughts at the moment. As soon as Norris' voice fell, the 120mm machine guns in the hands of the two land-type Zagu burst out flames of different lengths, and all the ammunition they carried poured out towards Lancelot. However, this whistling sound came again, and the invincible attack in the past encountered a setback. Just as Norris had witnessed, the two Zaguai's attacks were completely blocked by the strange and mysterious barrier. Even if the high explosive shells fired by the Zagu were enough to easily destroy the Type 61 tank, it was still deflected by the seemingly thin layer of strange light shield that was actually extremely hard. Boom! 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 The explosions caused by the high explosive shells struck the barrier one after another, but Nora's heart only grew colder and colder. Even though he had personally witnessed Lancelot, who was behind the barrier of light, being pushed back by the force of the explosion, and even being pushed back by the force of the explosion, Norris could not help but feel the chill in his heart. It was too hard. It was too solid. Norris couldn't understand why that damned light barrier had appeared, or how it had appeared. He knew that if it wasn't for this damned light barrier, the small body in front of him that wasn't even considered mysterious would definitely be destroyed by the 120mm machine gun in the hands of the land-type Zagu. However, it was because of this damned light barrier that his wish could never come true. Crack! Suddenly, the other land-type Zagu that was attacking Lancelot along with Norris had emptied its ammunition. Not good. Be careful. Norris was shocked. The moment he opened his mouth to warn, a shadow flashed under the light barrier, without any warning. In the next second, the land-type Zagu that had emptied its ammunition seemed to have been hit by a strong force, and was sent flying backwards. It only came to a stop after it crashed into dozens of trees. As for the pilot sitting inside, even if he didn't die, he wouldn't be too far off. Damn it! Norris' gaze didn't linger on his unlucky teammate for a moment, because he had already seen Lancelot that had been hiding under the strange light barrier finally appear in front of him, and that damned light barrier seemed to have disappeared. In other words, now was his chance. At least, Norris thought so. It was now or never. After realizing this, Norris launched another attack. The 120mm machine gun's flames were once again spat out. However, in the next second, Norris quickly controlled the aircraft to raise the 120mm machine gun in his hands and threw it towards Lancelot. Then, the moment the 120mm machine gun flew out of his hands, Norris land-type Zagu bent down and picked up the heat axe that had fallen on the ground when the land-type Zagu was sent flying. Virum! As the heat axe's blade heated up, the land-type Zaguai's backpack thruster roared. Prepare to die. Norris let out a furious roar. The Zagu, too, which had soared into the air, brandished the thermal axe in its hands. In the instant that the 120mm machine gun smashed into the light barrier, it ferociously hacked down towards Lancelot. Boom! The hot heat axe's blade split open the 120mm machine gun and detonated the remaining ammunition on the 120mm machine gun and fiercely chopped down on the light barrier. Crack! At this moment, Norris seemed to have heard the sound of something breaking. Success! As this thought came to his mind, Norris realized that something was wrong. Yes, behind this ka sound, there was a series of rumbling sounds that went from subtle to loud. Moreover, it sounded so quickly that it seemed to have happened in an instant. Virum! Virum! Numerous streaks of red light tore through the smoke between the land-type Zagu 2 and the light barrier without any warning. At the same time, while Norris was completely defenseless, the streaks of red light frantically traversed through the land-type Zagu 2's body. Swish! 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 The armor that was so sturdy that it could even ignore most of the firepower in the past was now like a fragile piece of paper. It was cut and shredded by the red lights until it was completely peeled off from the land-type Zagu eye. This moment, to Norris, seemed like a long time had passed, but in fact, it was only a matter of a few breaths. Boom! A loud explosion and violent vibration pulled Norris' mind back to reality from what seemed to be a long time ago. Colonel Norris, quickly catch Apsalus. Iona's voice suddenly sounded, and also brought a ray of light to Norris' eyes. Norris, who subconsciously pushed the control lever until he fainted, did not realize that he had successfully caught Apsalus, who came to rescue him in a moment of life and death. The billowing black smoke emanating from Apusara's body almost covered the entire sky. It also covered the figure of the land-type Zagatu that had caught the armor on his body. On the ground, Lancelot, who was standing in the pile of debris cut off from the land-type Zai, slowly put down the radiation vibrosword in his hand. Did he escape? Ha! Forget it. I'll let you go this time. Ray Minkai slowly retracted his thumb from the button to activate the light wing and shook his head slightly. Now, relying on Lancelot's light wing system to chase after Apsalus, the success rate was undoubtedly high. But on the other hand, Ray Minkai also had to risk exposing Lancelot to the Earth Federation army. There was no doubt. As long as Lancelot, who had high mobility and small size while maintaining a powerful firepower and other advantages, appeared in the Federation's line of sight, it would definitely attract a lot of attention with ulterior motives. This was not what Ray Minkai wanted to see. Before figuring out the dark secrets of this world, Ray Minkai did not intend to disclose his identity. Well, now let's go and get the Zagu eye that was kicked away by Lancelot. At least, driving the Zagu eye back would make it easier to explain my actions during this period of time. How Ray Minkai used the Zagu eye to cover up Lancelot's existence was another matter. Under Iona's call, Norris, who was dragged out from the damaged and almost scrapped Zagu eye, finally woke up slowly. Where is this? Norris's eyes, which were initially confused, quickly became clear, especially when he saw half of a Zagatu hanging on Apu Thalas's body. The memories from before came flooding back to him. Is that so? Did I lose the battle? After sighing, Norris also accepted reality. Moreover, when he shifted his gaze from the Zagu eye to the woman sitting on the side, he immediately recognized the woman's identity. You are Miss Ina Sakhaline? The woman nodded slowly. Yes, I am Ina Sakhaline. Nice to meet you, Colonel Norris. I didn't expect that we would meet under such circumstances. The woman, Ina, smiled slightly and sighed somewhat helplessly. Norris slightly pulled the corner of his mouth. For a veteran of the battlefield like him, such circumstances were nothing out of the ordinary. I made a fool of myself in front of Miss Ina. Norris slowly took in a breath and looked around. He realized that other than Apsalus and half of the Zagu eye, there was only him and Ina. Miss Ina, do you know Massid and the others? Iona's expression was slightly sluggish. Then she shook her head. Although she didn't say anything, her expression already made Norris understand. Is that so? Massid and the others have already died for their country? Norris sighed and then tried to stand up. Colonel Norris, you can't move as you wish. You must now wait for the arrival of reinforcements. Ina saw the sweat quickly appearing on Norris's forehead and immediately reminded Norris to pay attention to his body. No, don't worry. Miss Ina, right now, Norris Sakhaline, have been ordered to report. From now on, I will be Miss Ina Sakhaline's bodyguard and fight for the ideals of Miss Ina Sakhaline and Major General Kinia Sakhaline. Enduring the intense pain from his wound, Norris Barkard loudly declared to Ina Sakhaline, the person he will be loyal to in the future. Colonel Norris, Miss Ina, you could just call me Norris. Ina looked at Norris, who had a straight face, and helplessly shook her head. All right, Norris, you better lie down now. The reinforcements sent by Major General Kinias should be arriving soon. Yes, in the mountains. In a hidden secret base, A sharp shattering sound broke the silence. What surprise! A languid female voice slowly sounded from the corner, and, at the same time, a graceful body wrapped in a decent dress walked out from the shadows. Under the flame-like bright red hair, the pair of purple gemstones that flickered with confusion were also sizing up the Major General, who swept all the glassware on the table to the ground with an angry face. I didn't think that the always wise and calm Major General Phineas Sakhaline would have such a side. You really surprised me. Shut up, Miss Q. With a furious roar, Phineas, who had a struggling expression on his face, quickly calmed down. He slowly raised his head and looked at the graceful woman whose every move was enough to charm all the men in the world. Welcome, sir. Miss Q. I hope that everything here will be able to satisfy you. Phineas calmly raised his foot and stepped over the pile of shattered glassware and stood in front of the woman he called Miss Q. Oh! The corner of the fiery red woman's eyes twitched as she glanced at Phineas' face that had already calmed down with interest. Her eyes revealed a trace of undisguised, probing light. Thus, the fiery red woman slowly opened her mouth. I heard from General Kilian. Major General Phineas, your research project can give the Guion Duchy the power to decide the outcome of this battle? Yes. Facing the fiery red woman's question, Phineas nodded and said confidently, for the glory of Sakhaline, and for the supreme glory of Guion. It seems that Major General is really confident. But now, the X3 engine that Major General regards as the key to completing Apsaras has already been taken down by the Federation Army. The fiery red woman's purple gems-like eyes slowly moved as they swept across Phineas' calm face again and again. I wonder where Major General Phineas' confidence comes from. The fiery red woman's question made Phineas silent. Yes, according to the original plan, the X3 engine was a necessity for Apsaras in the future. But now, such an important key had fallen into the hands of the Federation. Can Apsaras still continue? If not, then gone. No, it should be said that the glory of the Sakhaline family will be gone. Phineas slowly raised his gaze and looked at the fiery red woman's delicate face. Finally, his body slowly lowered. Caw creak. The glass shards scattered around Phineas' feet made a slight squeezing sound. Traces of captivating red also dyed Phineas' trousers red, but Phineas remained unmoved. He raised his right hand as if he was worshipping and gently lifted the fiery red woman's right hand, then lightly tapped the back of her hand. I salute you, Miss Q. Chapter 302. The raging flames were extinguished by a sufficient amount of extinguishing agent. Standing on the edge of the wreckage, a group of federal soldiers sweating profusely, but they didn't dare to be careless. They were holding fire extinguishers in their hands as they patrolled the wreckage that was burned to the point where only the skeleton was left. They extinguished all the sparks that came out of the wreckage. Not far away from the wreckage, there were 6 Gauda Marines and a Marine Zago II. That was the active duty MS of the Guion Army. In this war, although there were a few cases like this where the enemy's MS was completely captured, it was still considered a rarity. After all, not everyone could capture the active duty MS of the Guion Army without any injuries. Hey, I didn't expect the reporter lieutenant to be so capable. He just cleaned up the obstacles on the team's way, but he brought back a big fish. Mostra yelled at Sam, drawing a lot of attention. This was a great opportunity to gain face. Although Ray Minkai was only a temporary member of the 6th Squad, in the eyes of outsiders, Ray Minkai was a real teammate of the 6th Squad. Therefore, this Marine Zagu, I was undoubtedly regarded by other squads as the achievement of all the members of the 6th Squad. On the other side, Ray Minkai, Leonti, and Shiro Amada gathered together. Second Lieutenant, you also saw the huge body before? Leonti pondered for a moment, and when he spoke again, he also said the words he knew. Huge MA. You should have seen it too, right? Second Lieutenant. Ray Minkai glanced at Shiro Amada, and nodded silently. Captain, I did see the huge MA. I didn't expect Guillaume to build such a huge MA. Although from our first contact with the experience, this huge MA does not seem to be equipped with any weapons, but the huge body is impossible to ignore. Yes, Second Lieutenant is right. Captain Leone, in the previous contact, this huge MA only relied on an impact of an unknown force field to suppress our two MS squads. If it weren't for the Second Lieutenant ambushing not far away, we would have lost the opportunity to seize such goods. Shiro Amada agreed with Rei Minkai's words. In his opinion, the first appearance of Apsaras was amazing. Without relying on any weapons, just relying on the impact caused by the unknown force, the two MS squads were almost paralyzed. Such a terrifying weapon was really unforgettable for Shiro Amada. I agree with this point. It's just, can such goods still be found? Leonti nodded, and then looked at the soldiers who were rummaging through the wreckage. Maybe. Rei Minkai shook his head and didn't have much hope. In a previous sniping, Rei Minkai did not deliberately aim at the cockpit of the Doral transport aircraft. Instead, he chose to aim at the wing, which was a more difficult target. Even so, the sound of the huge Doral transport aircraft crashing into the rainforest was loud enough. There was a roar. The Doral transport plane, whose wings had been broken by Lancelot, exploded along with the cargo it was carrying. Two captains. I found something. At this time, when the three of them were talking about what goods were loaded on the Dora, the soldiers who were searching the wreckage also came with good news. However, before Rei Minkai and the other two walked over to check it out, an order was passed to them from behind. Standby order? Are you kidding me? Leorut took the order from the messenger, who was panting from running, and raised his doubts in surprise. Although today's operation was hindered by some obstacles, it was completed successfully in the end. Moreover, Leone felt that if they could continue to move forward with this momentum, they might be able to advance the battle line a little. Let me see. Shiro Amada took the order and glanced at it. He was also a little surprised. The 6th Squad and the 8th Squad are on standby. Second Lieutenant Rei Minkai, after receiving the order, immediately set off to return to the station. After reading it, Shiro Amada didn't think much of it. He shook the order in his hand, looked at Rei Minkai, and said, Second Lieutenant, it seems that your activity has attracted the attention of the captain. Rei Minkai smiled bitterly. He took the order, glanced at it, and shook his head. Maybe this is not a good thing. Leorut laughed. Not a good thing? I don't think so. Then Leone patted Rei Minkai on the shoulder. Okay, leave this to us. You should go back to the station. Rei Minkai pondered for a moment. No, let's see what we found in the wreckage first. In the end, Rei Minkai's proposal didn't yield any results. As soon as he saw the cargo container that was wrapped in countless melted metal, Rei Minkai knew that his plan to see the mysterious goods in a short time was probably not going to work. In this temporarily set-up frontier, there were no large industrial machines that could be used to cut. Therefore, the only thing they could do was to transport the container wrapped in melted metal back to the station and deal with it later. It seems that you can escape, Second Lieutenant. Leone laughed, then straightened his face and saluted Rei Minkai. Then, I'll see you later. Second Lieutenant. See you later. Captain Leonti and Captain Amada. See you later, Second Lieutenant. After the rain, the muddy road once again raised a burst of mud, and in the depths of the dense forest on both sides of the muddy road, under the control of the standby command, Lancelot was slowly wrapped in a layer of liquid metal and quietly disappeared from the rainforest in the blink of an eye. The road was bumpy. The degree of bumpiness made Rei Minkai, who was sitting in the car, think that it was better to walk than to sit in the jeep driving on the muddy road. Fortunately, after entering the 30-kilometer defensive range of the encampment, the level of the road became better. Rei Minkai heaved a sigh of relief. Otherwise, Rei Minkai, who couldn't kill the fierce MS battle, would be defeated by the bumpy road. Thank you for your hard work, Second Lieutenant. Looking at Rei Minkai, who was covered in mud, Captain Kojima also shook his head helplessly. The weather here was really changeable. No matter how many times the road was repaired, it was bound to fail under this strange weather change. Do it. Second Lieutenant, do you want a glass of water? I think in a tough spot. Kojima asked Ray Minkai to sit down, got up, took the paper cup next to him, and filled a glass of water for Ray Minkai. Thank you, Captain. No, this is what I should do. Compared to me sitting here, you soldiers who are fighting on the front line should rest the most. Captain Kojima waved his hand. Then, Kojima fumbled for a while from the pile of documents on the table and handed a document to Ray Minkai. Second Lieutenant, this is a piece of information sent from the headquarters a few days ago. I think you need to take a look. Ray Minkai was taken aback. He was a little puzzled, but he still put the cup aside and took the document. He flipped through it. After a long time, Ray Minkai, who was reading the information, showed a dignified face. Captain, when did this happen? Kojima reached out and pushed his glasses. This happened after you intercepted the suspected high-power energy output device. From the information, maybe our previous conclusion is going to be overturned. The high-power energy output device is probably just a cover. We have been deceived. Ray Minkai's brows slowly frowned, but soon relaxed. Captain, are you saying that this is a diversion by the enemy? Well, there is this possibility. Also, didn't you find a secret stronghold of Ji Wang and take it down? At the same time, you seem to have gained a lot of loot. Yes, but we need to use the heavy construction machinery here to open the metal shell to know what is inside. Ray Minkai suddenly remembered that if the White Cat Zero did not go to the secret base where Ino was, there would be no need for such a troublesome process to know what it was. Heavy construction machinery? It seems that the loot this time is a bit troublesome. Go do it. Yes. In the shadows, a ghostly white shadow flashed by. Hey, did you see anything? The John soldier, standing next to the intersection, poked his companion next to him. What? See what? There's nothing? The companion shook his head, casually glanced around, and asked inexplicably, It seems like something passed by there. This statement made the companion sneered a few times. Are you not full yet? There is nothing here. Even if there is, it is probably Miss INA's White Cat. White Cat. The John soldier was stunned, then shook his head. Maybe. Recently, Miss Ina went out to test the body and encountered the Federation Army's Ms. Squad. Now she's resting in a secret place. I don't know if this news is true or not. Don't talk nonsense. Let's take care of ourselves first. The discussion gradually became softer until it could no longer be heard. Only then did the small, white, ghost-like figure jump out of the pipe on the ceiling. That human woman was defeated? I'm afraid it is Guy's credit. The golden pupils looked at the position of the two John soldiers, then turned to the deeper part of the tunnel. Not long ago, a very familiar aura suddenly appeared here, but after a detailed search, I did not find anything. It is very strange. The white ghost was the White Cat State Zero who sneaked in here as a stray cat. It raised its small head, silently looked at the deep tunnel for a while, then slowly lifted its feet, jumped on top of the pipe again, and quickly ran into the depths of the tunnel. In fact, the White Cat State Zero was cautious about the deep tunnel in front of it. Especially after the sudden appearance and disappearance of the aura, the White Cat State Zero became more cautious in its heart. What on earth is hidden here? With such a question, the White Cat State Zero followed the pipe tunnel on the ceiling to a room. Click! Suddenly, the door of the room suddenly made a sound. It was the sound of the lock being unlocked. Kineas, I didn't expect your ideas to be so unique. Even in this chaotic world, your way of thinking is still so interesting. As the door opened, a lazy woman's voice came from inside. This voice. Upon hearing this voice, the White Cat State Zero's pupils suddenly shrank into a narrow line. It seemed to remember this voice. Then, under the gaze of the White Cat State Zero, the graceful figure also turned out of the open door. The fiery red hair gently fluttering in the air, the pair of gem-like eyes, and the arc at the corner of the mouth suddenly made the White Cat State Zero let out an angry roar. Who? Who is hiding there? The flame-like woman suddenly raised her head and stared at the pipelines on the ceiling. Her eyes gradually became cold, and Kineas, who walked out of the room after her, could not help but feel a trace of deep, cold, murderous intent. "Dear madam, what happened?" Kineas frowned, glanced at the empty surroundings, and asked carefully. The flame-red woman did not answer, but just stared at the pipe channels on the ceiling. Meow. A weak and somewhat pitiful cry gradually came from the pipe channel under the cold gaze of the flame-red woman. Then a shadow swayed, and Kenya saw a small head slowly extend out of the pipeline. It looked at him carefully and also looked at the fiery red woman beside him. Seeing this scene, Kineas breathed a sigh of relief. "Madam, this is the kitten that my sister recently adopted. It probably ran out because it was starving." "Starving?" The flame-red woman lowered her gaze and looked at Kineas, her eyes full of questions. "Yes, Ina has recently been carrying out a mission to test Apsaras, so she probably did not prepare enough food for this kitten." Kineas nodded, looking at the small, cowering figure above his head. "Is that so?" The flame-red woman seemed to have accepted this explanation. She raised her eyebrows and said, "It seems that we have to find your sister quickly, Kineas. Otherwise, not only will this poor kitten starve to death, but I'm afraid that even Apsaras' follow-up plan will be affected." Hearing this, Kineas bowed slightly and saluted the flame-red woman. "As you wish, dear madam." The storm ended just like that, until the flame-red woman and Kineas' figures completely disappeared into the depths of the pipe channel. The white cat, State 0, lying on the pipe channel, gradually relaxed. When the fur on its body stood up, the white cat's eyes emitted a trace of murderous intent. "Miss Q, I didn't expect to meet you in this strange world." Chapter 303. At the station of the Mechanical Mix Brigade. All the soldiers of the Mechanical Mix Brigade canceled their leave and followed the first-level combat readiness order of Captain Xiao Dao. They doubled the security range of the entire station from the original 30 kilometers. Meanwhile, the core security circle of the Mechanical Mix Brigade's encampment was filled with capable MS teams, forming an impenetrable defense circle. Although such a formation was a bit exaggerated, Captain Xiao Dao felt that it was necessary. Not long ago, the engineering team responsible for studying the high-power energy output device seized before took over the iron lump that Ray Minkai seized again. They began to study how to take out the thing wrapped in the melted metal shell. As a result, after a period of research and work, an unknown device that was more sophisticated and rigorous than the high-power energy output device seized before appeared in front of everyone's eyes. As soon as it appeared, a shocking fact was placed in front of Captain Xiao Dao, Ray Minkai, and others. The high-power energy output device seized earlier was just a replica of this unknown device that looked extremely sophisticated and advanced. In a strict sense, these high-power energy output devices that looked like some kind of large-scale machinery might just be some low-quality counterfeit products. Although this conclusion seemed a bit illusory and out of place, after seeing the unidentified device dug out from the iron lump, everyone realized a conclusion in their hearts. That was when everyone thought that the high-power energy output devices must be the trump card of the Guion army hidden in the Southeast Asian front. The real trump card appeared in front of them unknowingly, and the so-called trump card was slapped in the big hole of counterfeit products. Thus, when he realized that Ji Wang's army might choose to do something crazy in order to take back this trump card, Commander Xiao Dao immediately issued a Level 1 combat readiness order and truthfully requested for reinforcements from headquarters. Second Lieutenant, this time, it's all thanks to you. I didn't expect that just approving your application to go out and collect materials would usher in such a rich harvest. Standing in front of the simple factory temporarily built by the engineering team, Xiao Dao sighed slightly. In his opinion, Ray Minkai's effort was probably enough to match the efforts of the entire Mechanical Mix Brigade for several months. No, Captain, you're being too serious. I just happened to be there at the right time." In response to Xiao Dao's praise, Ray Minkai just shook his head lightly. To be able to obtain such a harvest was because he was familiar with the direction of the plot. However, even so, the appearance of this unknown device made Ray Minkai feel a little uncomfortable and anxious. As the White Cat State Zero was not by his side, Ray Minkai could not immediately distinguish what was inside this unknown device. Moreover, it was not convenient for Ray Minkai to take out his own equipment in this station. After all, there were too many eyes here. Ray Minkai wasn't confident that he wouldn't be discovered by others when he was investigating the unknown device. This was the conclusion they came to after repeatedly confirming that Captain Xiao Dao was constantly increasing the number of troops stationed around the simple factory. "Second Lieutenant, I'll have trouble with you. Moreover, there seemed to be a new order from the headquarters. At that time, you will be assigned to your unit." Suddenly, a mysterious smile appeared on Xiao Dao's face. "What? The unit you belong to?" Lei Mingkai was taken aback and asked subconsciously. "Captain, I'm just a war reporter. How could I be assigned to the combat unit?" Glancing at Lei Mingkai's dumbfounded expression, Xiao Dao's mood suddenly improved. "Ha ha ha! Second Lieutenant, if you're just a war reporter, I'll think it's a waste of talent." After laughing for a while, Xiao Dao's eyes showed a glimmer of light. "Second Lieutenant, since you sat on Gao Da's seat, the results have proven that you're a qualified, no, an excellent pilot. In this day of increasingly intense war, if I let a hero who may become the end of this war just run around with a camera, as a commander, I will never forgive myself for turning a blind eye to your existence." Hearing this, Ray Minkai twitched the corner of his mouth. "Even if, after that, I will be sacrificed on the battlefield?" Xiao Dao was silent for a moment, but still nodded firmly. "Yes, Second Lieutenant, this is war. In order to win the final victory, and in order to end this war that was started to fulfill the ambitions of some people and cause countless people to fall into disaster, I must make some choices." After a pause, Xiao Dao's voice suddenly became low. "Even if I have to personally send my subordinates to the battlefield one by one." Xiao Dao's statement made Ray Minkai feel a little heavy. He knew, as early as the beginning of the war, Captain Xiao Dao had lost too many subordinates in this war. It was not until the end of the war, in the final battle with Apsaras, that he made a choice. Now this Captain Xiao Dao was far from reaching that stage. After a moment of silence, Ray Minkai slowly nodded. "Captain, I already understand the mission. In that case, which squad will I belong to? You'll know when the time comes. Second Lieutenant, you'll get along with them." Xiao Dao did not reveal Ray Minkai's latest order at all. He just smiled mysteriously and turned to leave. Looking at Xiao Dao's back, Ray Minkai looked down at the camera hanging around his neck and suddenly laughed out loud. "It seems that I don't need this camera anymore. This beautiful wish was not realized after all." After all, during this time, Ray Minkai took the camera everywhere in this station, and his interview had been accepted by everyone. As long as they saw Ray Minkai appear with the camera, the soldiers who were on duty would take the initiative to ask Ray Minkai to take a few photos for them. For these requests, Ray Minkai certainly would not refuse. In addition to facing the attacks of the Gion army every day, the soldiers in Southeast Asia also had to face the harsh environment of the rainforest. Maybe during a mission, they did not die in the hands of the Gion army, but were accidentally swallowed by the rainforest. For this reason, the soldiers wanted to record their existence as much as possible, and the arrival of Ray Minkai was an opportunity. Take it slow. Everyone has one. Don't rush. After taking out the camera holder, Ray Minkai found a place with good lighting conditions and began to take photos of the soldiers. Unexpectedly, more and more soldiers came after hearing the news, and almost filled the corner used for taking personal photos. "Hey, those bastards from that area. What are you doing? Go back to your duty." As more and more people gathered, it immediately attracted the dissatisfaction of a certain old man. The soldiers turned around to see who was the one who was making a ruckus. When they saw the old man with slanted eyebrows and a cowboy hat on his head, they suddenly trembled. They quickly smiled apologetically and pulled away their comrade who didn't know what was going on. "Business is pretty good," second lieutenant reporter. After the last soldier left, an old man's voice suddenly sounded behind Ray Minkai, and Ray Minkai vaguely smelled a hint of alcohol. "Uh-huh, I'm done for the time being." Ray Minkai nodded and put away the camera holder. He turned around and showed a confused expression. "Do you know where they sell film?" "Old man." The pair of cloudy eyes under the cowboy hat stared at Ray Minkai. All of a sudden, laughter rang out. "Ha ha! I didn't expect someone to use film to take photos in this era. Interesting, interesting." The old man's laughter continued, but this laughter was powerful. "Are you surprised? After all, sometimes the existence of film is more reliable than precision electronic parts." Ray Minkai raised the camera in his hand. "Haha, you're right. It just so happens that I have a batch of film here that has been stored for a long time. Are you interested?" Second lieutenant. The old man raised his right hand and pushed the cowboy hat with his index finger. "Of course. If it can be used, maybe I can give a very good price. I don't know what you think, old man." "Huh, good. Follow me." It seems that second lieutenant is also a straightforward person. "How about this? You help me do something, and then I'll give you the film at half price. How about it?" "Oh, then I'll have to think about it." The scorching sun slowly rose into the sky. In the entire station, except for the soldiers who returned to the resting area, the rest of the soldiers could only stay at their posts to perform guard duties. Under such circumstances, the entire encampment fell into silence. In the past, the airframes that took turns to repair had already been repaired overnight after the first-level combat readiness order was issued, and they were sent to the alert area to perform tasks. In this quiet and tense atmosphere, a camera placed in a secluded corner was faithfully recording most of the situation in this station in a position that could capture most of the situation in this station. As the sun in the sky slowly set in the west, the cool shade of the trees also shrouded this position. At this time, as the sound of footsteps slowly sounded, a figure appeared under the shade of the trees. He looked around, as if to confirm that there would not be too many people coming here. Then he casually found a place here, half lay down, and took out the book in his trouser pocket, opened it, and carefully read it. This, perhaps, was the portrayal of a young man who took advantage of the rare free time to read books in his busy schedule. However, this portrayal was destined not to last. A few minutes later, a woman with fiery red hair, a dignified face, and wearing a sweater strode from not far away and came to the front of the young man who was flipping through the book. "Cough. Captain, there is a document here that needs you to confirm." The dignified woman said so. The young man raised his gaze, looked at the document in the woman's hand, nodded, and took the document, looked at it, and after confirming that there was no problem with the content, he signed his name. "Then, I won't disturb Captain's rest time." After the dignified woman took the document, she turned around and left. The young man, who regained his free time, picked up the book again and began to read the content in the book again. However, free time was destined to not be with this young man. When he gradually became intoxicated with the content of the book, two figures, one short and one tall, quietly slipped behind the young man from not far away. Then, the short figure paused, took a step forward, put on a posture of, "I'm just looking around," and walked out from the young man's side. On the way, he also made a peace sign to the camera placed next to him. Immediately afterward, the tall figure also walked behind the short man, and when passing by the position of the camera, he even placed the indescribable map that he had treasured for a long time in front of the camera. For all of this, the young man, who was already intoxicated with the content of the book, had no idea. The intoxicated look on his face made the people who were hiding beside him surprised. What book is this kid reading? Why is he so fascinated? The old man with the water bottle in his hand took a big gulp of water and said with some dissatisfaction, "Old man, why are you doing this? The captain didn't seem to have offended you." right? The dignified woman who came back frowned. In the beginning, when the old quartermaster suggested to test someone's attention, she maintained her opposition. But after seeing that the old quartermaster even pulled Ray Minkai in, the dignified woman who opposed nodded in agreement. Offend? No, no, no. Your captain didn't offend me. I just want to test him. See, there's a second lieutenant reporter here, and he can take a short video or something for you to submit to the headquarters and let the officials sitting in the office see the situation on the front line. The old quartermaster grinned, revealing his jagged teeth. Is that really the case? The youngest, Negri, carefully raised his doubts. Idiot. If you don't believe me, you can ask this second lieutenant reporter from the headquarters. The old quartermaster slapped Negri and brought the topic to Ray Minkai, who was paying attention to the camera. The situation is indeed similar. Now with the situation clear, the core of the entire war has gradually shifted from the Earth to the universe. Therefore, in the future, resources will be provided to the universe army first. Ray Minkai said this calmly. How come? That's it. Negri. The dignified woman, Karen, casually placed the document in her hand on Negri's head and then looked at the old quartermaster. Old man, has the supply recently decreased? The old quartermaster smiled. He didn't confirm or deny it, but it was enough. It seems that this time our captain has to work hard. After Karen sighed secretly, she looked at Ray Minkai again. Second Lieutenant, let's begin. And then, the scene of the 8th Squad, Captain Shiro Amada's day begins. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.